Thanks for tuning in to another presentation courtesy of Product Marketing Off-Piste. We hope you've enjoyed the session. The good news, we've even more speakers lined up who will be sharing their product marketing expertise. So brace yourself, it promises to be quite the ride.
ACI is a digital payment software company. Our headquarters is in the US, but we have 4,000 employees spread across 6 continents, serving 19 out of the 20 largest financial institutions and banks, as well as corporates and merchants all around the world. Social media channels have become an increasingly important part of B2B marketing strategy, and that includes empowering your own employees to play an active role in your social media program. But it needs to be approached in a compliant manner, and Octopost is something that's enabled us to do that. What convinced us to work with Octopost was the fact they had a really clear focus on the needs of B2B marketers. That was their integrations with Marketo and Salesforce, as well as the fact that LinkedIn wasn't just an add-on, it was really at the core of the platform that they were offering. The second thing that drew us to Octopost was their offering on the employee advocacy side. We knew that when it came to putting an app or a tool in the hands of our employees, that it had to be something that was intuitive and easy to use. It had to be something that saved them time, and it had to be something that could easily fit within their existing routines. Octopost also helps us to effectively manage the needs of our broader social media program. This can be everything from managing an increasingly complex editorial calendar through to producing analytics report at both a high level and at the campaign level. We've seen some really satisfying results from Octopost if we compare to the same period last year. 250% increase in audience reach. We've actually seen engagement around employee shared content over the past year more than double, and a 3-fold increase in website traffic generated from employee shared content. The number of leads converting from social content, so from both our corporate pages and from advocacy, has almost doubled during that same time period. Octopost has helped us to achieve our goals in terms of empowering employees to play a more active role in our social media program. It's also helped them to position themselves as experts in their fields.
Hello and welcome to this session titled 99 Ways that Social Media Can Help Product Marketers Deliver Their Best. I'm Colin Day, and over the past 30 years, I've been helping companies build and operate high-performing go-to-market functions across the globe. In my current position as the Managing Director, leading the commercial operations across Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Asia Pacific for Octopost, a market leader in B2B social media management and employee advocacy solutions, I speak daily with product, marketing, and sales professionals on the impact that social media can have on a product, a brand, or even an individual's own standing in their respective marketplace. Over the course of the next 15 minutes, I'd like to share with you some ways that social can help product marketers deliver their best. During the time together, we'll explore 3 key areas: the considerations of social data when developing buyer personas. Where can and should social data be used to influence your go-to-market strategies? How can you leverage social data to inform and empower your product content strategies? Now, we've got a lot to get through in a very short space of time. So what I suggest we do is buckle our seatbelts and put our foot on the accelerator pedal. Look, before we go too much further, I think it's best to give a little consideration to why we're sitting here today. Why this session? Okay, it may well have been the title that piqued your interest. But for some, the number 99 is lucky. Or it could be down to the fact that the topic is all around social media. One thing's for sure, it certainly isn't my personality or my presentation style, but I'll let you judge that for yourself as we go across the next 15 minutes. One thing's for sure though, most of us, if not all of us sitting on this conference today, work for B2B organisations. And I think we can all attest to the role that social media plays in our engagement with our clients, our prospects, our employees, or indeed our prospective employees. Statistically, social media is the third largest engagement channel outside of your corporate website and email. But the world of social isn't for the faint-hearted. It requires bright people with a diverse skill set from a diverse background to come together and fight against some of the most mysterious algorithms on the planet. In the overall grand scheme of things, social media is relatively new to B2B organisations, with many only just dipping their toes in the water from a branding and customer service perspective. Organisations in regulated industries are probably the biggest laggards that I come across on a daily basis. Upskilling your product, marketing, sales, HR, and customer support teams is always a good idea, but who owns that responsibility? And who owns the responsibility to upskill leadership? As product marketers, we aim to guide our product from cradle to grave, from development to launch, through all stages of the product lifecycle. We take into account product positioning, pricing, competition, and we typically start off by looking at and understanding our target market and our target addressable market. It all starts with a problem statement and quickly moves into understanding if that problem is pervasive, if it's solvable, and if the market's prepared to pay to solve it. Product Marketing 101. What's this got to do with social media? Everything. If we were to raise our hands, or ask you to raise your hands to see whom in the audience are using personas and persona profiles to aid them in some or all of these tasks, I bet you that the majority, if not all of you, would be putting your hands in the air. Look, as we build these persona profiles, we look to form a caricature of the end user, of those involved in our ecosystem. We look at their goals and objectives, why solving the problem that we've identified is important to them. We look at their job titles, we identify the industries they work in, the countries they come from, maybe their age, their academic credentials, maybe their gender, how long they've been in their role. Simple stuff and relatively easy to build a hypothesis on, given that you can just look at your existing customer base. But what about when we want to know the watering holes that these personas go to in order to get information? After all, we can't forget that we live in a hyper-connected world, one where the B2B buyer is at least 70% of the way through their buying journey before they even speak to one of your sales associates. We're all familiar with such statistics from people that are much brighter and smarter than me, the likes of Forrester and Gartner. In fact, Gartner will tell us that the B2B buyer, on average, will only spend 17% of the buying cycle meeting with potential suppliers. Some other interesting statistics. Look, we live in a world of 7.81 billion people, and that number grows constantly. 67% of these are unique mobile phone users. 60% of them are internet users, and 53% or 4.14 billion active social media users. According to research from Global Web Index, the typical internet user spends almost 7 hours per day using connected devices. This was statistics that they gleaned between April and June of 2020, so fairly recently. With social media platforms consuming more than 1/3 of our connected time, that is around 2.5 hours per day spent on social media platforms. We spend so much of our connected life digitally. We put so much of our lives online. We leave such a huge digital footprint. So as product marketers, how do we utilize the wealth of this data and glean insights to better understand social patterns and people's interests, all of which is great information to bring back into our persona profiles. Across my career in financial services, financial technology, and more recently marketing technology, I've always found that persona profiles that are created by product marketers are living, breathing things. They start off supporting our problem statements. They move forward into marketing to help with our launch strategies. They, in some instances, go into product demonstrations used by sales executives and sales engineers. Our colleagues in digital marketing pick them up and utilize them to help direct their content, the content that we're placing on the website, for example. The use of persona profiles that you create can and should touch and involve colleagues across your business. As the use extends, so does the requirements for knowledge and insight, from persona interests to the keywords and hashtags that they're using and following out on social. Putting your customer or your prospective customer at the heart of everything you do is the difference between what will make you a good product marketer and a great product marketer. We could have the best product in the world, but if we don't know who we're targeting, if we don't know what their problems are, and if we don't know if they're willing to pay for it, I'd argue that product marketing's failed, wouldn't you? Social gives us access to all sorts of invaluable information about our audience, their age, their location, their gender, their job title, their interests, even down to the devices that they're connecting with us on. Additionally, following industry influencers or monitoring social engagement can help identify the buyer's pain points and the sentiment that they have towards these. Buyer personas are a tremendous structure and insight, allowing us to focus and guide product development and allowing us to align across the enterprise. Or if we were to put this another way, we use the buyer persona that we create to help place bets and make investments that will see our products and our companies grow and succeed, or wither and die. Dramatic, maybe, but buyer personas help ensure that all activities involved in the customer lifecycle, from acquisition to customer service, are tailored and targeted towards our customers' needs. As I've said previously, buyer personas are living, breathing things. We always need to be learning more about our customers, learning more about our target audience. Go and look at your own websites. Look at the product and marketing collateral that you have. And I bet most of us will see ourselves taking great pride in talking about what we do, not what the customer needs. This puts us at odds with our buyers. When making purchasing decisions, people naturally gravitate towards brands that they know and companies that they trust. There's no better way to build that trust than to be able to demonstrate that you understand and are genuinely concerned about the person and the customer's needs. Social data can and should be used to influence your go-to-market strategy. Social media is no longer just a place to connect with your family, your friends, and your colleagues. It's most prominently a stepping stone on a path to purchase in every industry that's sitting here with us today. And it's easy to develop a strategy to collect and collate all of the data that we've been discussing. Let us use this diagram on the screen before you to explain this things further. The companies for whom we work probably have some form of corporate social strategy. We're probably publishing content through corporate social media channels, either natively on the networks themselves or using third-party vendors. Additionally, the company's employees, our colleagues, ourselves, might be sharing or engaging with some of this corporate content and using it across our own social channels and social accounts. Be that through a formal or informal employee advocacy program. Now look, it stands to reason that when content is shared out through both of these routes, people are going to engage with it. Not always, but most of the time. Be that a retweet on Twitter, or a like on Facebook, or a comment on LinkedIn, just some examples. As a product marketer, if I were able to garner access to this data, be it via the company's marketing automation platform or via the CRM system, I can take the relevant bits that I need and add these insights back into my persona profiles. Somewhere on social media, somebody is talking about a feature they wish your product offered. Another person is making negative comments about your company. They're not tagging your brand or writing on your page, but thousands of people are reading and absorbing the message. These posts can shape opinions about your brand and articulate exactly what it is the audience wants. But you'll never know what they're saying unless you employ social listening as part of your product marketing strategy. As product marketers, we can't afford to be blind or deaf to these data points. For all types of business, social listening is the first step in social selling. Social listening is critical to the process of adjusting to the new norm that the entire B2B segment is going through. The COVID-19 crisis has caused massive and sudden changes, leading to new trends, shifting expectations, and an uncertain future for many businesses. At the same time, buyers are shifting to digital to both ingest and produce business-related content. Businesses that listen and adapt are finding new ways to maintain and even grow their business in a chaotic world. When it comes to time to go to market with a product, a data-first strategy is critical. And social media is a great place to look for that data. But you need the tools to quickly gather and analyze the relevant social data across different networks. Social listening is a valuable source of business intelligence to your whole organization, and it can be leveraged in such a way. But given the volume of conversations on social, it's important that you have the right tools in place. A content strategy should be designed with engagement in mind. For me, it boils down to figuring out what content will help your target audience and inspire them to take the actions that ultimately lead to a conversion and close one business. Doing this successfully requires us to bring together several moving parts, including researching our audience and mapping out how our buyers are engaging and interacting with our content. The content strategy that we create as product marketers in conjunction with our colleagues across the organization are unique to each of our respective organizations and our own situations. There's no magic wand, no pixie dust that we can scatter around, no model that we can cookie cutter in order to quadruple our revenue. This being said, though, there are a few things that we can put in place to ensure that we're on the right path. We can study our audience, we can look at what content is being consumed and by whom, we can snoop, or rather research our customers. We can map our buyer journeys, we can conduct a gap analysis, develop a distribution strategy, and indeed build a content calendar. A huge mistake we make is that we look at our strategies and we have a heavy reliance upon our intuition, our gut feel. Don't get me wrong, gut instinct has a role to play, but it mustn't go unchecked. Being a data-led organization and building strategies based upon fact rather than instinct, these are the types of organizations that have a higher likelihood to succeed. We spend huge amounts of time and money creating content. Our content marketing colleagues can develop content faster than our customers can consume it. Did you know that as an industry, some more statistics, I'm afraid, but as an industry, the marketing content that we create, right? So industry analysts have done various analysis on this, and 60 to 80% of all B2B marketing content goes unused. This is a huge chunk of our marketing budget that we could be put to better use, driving more revenue-focused activities. So before you spend a penny on any piece of new content, lay out what your audience wants and look at it against what you're already providing them. Understand the gap, because this gap really is your sweet spot from a content creation perspective. The issue we have with traditional data sources is that they have many blind spots. By integrating the power of social media into your content strategy, product marketers can shine a light on these data blind spots, surfacing additional data points to better inform the strategy. Measuring how your product content is performing on social, exploring how many engagements, clicks, and conversions it's generating provides some great intelligence that can be fed back to help inform the likes of your audience studies or help you map your buyer journeys, understand where you've got content gaps. It'd be remiss of me not to mention the word personalization. Social data allows companies to personalize their customer journeys, including what content we should get in front of them, what channel and device they want to consume it on, what day and time of the week or time of the day it's best to get it in front of them. Providing B2B customers with personalized experiences has been shown to be much more effective than impersonal branded owned content. As mentioned previously, today's B2B buyers are prioritizing companies that they view as being authentic and trustworthy. Look, there are many ways to leverage social data in product marketing. It's time for product marketers to explore how, through the use of social data and social technology, we can build better customer experiences, getting insights into buyers' journeys, enhancing ROI, and bridging the data gap across marketing silos. Thank you for investing the time with me today. I trust you found the session insightful, and please feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to discuss any of the points and topics that I've covered during this session. I can be reached via email at the following email address, which is colin@oftpost.com. That's colin@oktpost.com. Thank you.
Welcome to Product Marketing Off-Piste. We've yet another exciting presentation coming up, but before we get started, we'd like to take a moment to thank every one of our sponsors and partners, because without them, we wouldn't be able to bring this event to you. Don't forget, each speaker is going to be answering your questions, offering tailored support after their presentation. So stick around, leave your question, and get advice from a true expert in the field, tailored to you. It's that simple. Enjoy the presentation.
"60% of your team's time goes to doing things that aren't actually work. Asana gives you that time back. Assign tasks, select due dates, and keep everyone on the same page. You can find the latest and greatest attached to each task. Discuss work details right where work happens. With Asana, your team can view any project in the way they find most useful. They can avoid getting overwhelmed by balancing their workload and removing bottlenecks. With Asana, you can see what everyone is doing and automate processes for the type of work you do most often. And it provides built-in feedback and approvals to keep things moving. Asana is built to scale across your entire company, so anyone can see where things are at and how it all maps back to the company goals. So get that time back and get the team organized around the work that matters most. Try Asana today.
Hi, thanks for tuning in to Product Marketing Off-Piste. Today we're joined by product marketer Giuseppe De La Gru. Hi Giuseppe, welcome to the show.
Hi Emma, thank you so much for having me.
So we'll just kick off with the first question. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience as a product marketer?
Sure. I'm Giuseppe, as you said. I'm an Italian based in Berlin after having lived in I think 5 countries. And right now I work at Klarna as a product marketeer, and I'm responsible for the Klarna card proposition and market expansion. I have a very diverse experience, actually. I've started in some traditional luxury company as a business analyst, and then when I joined Spotify as a strategy and operation manager, I started to understand the value of tech products and the value of a figure that is an hybrid between marketing and product. So my very first product marketing, let's say, touch point was at Spotify, but I've never worked as a product marketeer there. And then my real first product marketing experience was at Google in Milan, where I was part of the brand and reputation marketing team. And that was my first, let's say, real marketing role. It's where I actually discovered the product marketing competence, if you want to call it like that. And I really fell in love with it. So I moved after a couple of years at Google in Milan, I moved to Berlin to join N26 as a product marketeer in a very small but brilliant product marketing team. And we had the opportunity to really work closely with the chief product officer to build and promote cool stuff. And now I just moved to, like a couple of months ago, I just joined Klarna. But today I just want to stress that I'm talking as Giuseppe, the product marketeer, not for any company that.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about product marketing driven go-to-market. So we'll sort of kick off with the first go-to-market question. If the go-to-market strategy isn't typically led by product marketing at your organization, how do you go about convincing the C-suite to let you take the reins on that one?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Like in general, I feel like a product marketeer is a person that, or a professional that should be extremely flexible, able to work with different competence and stakeholders at the same time. So I feel that is already a natural fit for a go-to-market, which is usually very cross-functional. And to be super frank, I've never had the chance to kind of pitch my team to get a project, but I mostly had opportunities where I was already responsible for the launch, and I had to convince some C-levels maybe about the product we wanted to bring to the market, for example. So it's all about goal alignment, in my opinion. So as long as you know what's the clear goal of your company, and of course of your C-levels or any of the leads you need to bring on board, I'd say that's the key to get the project green light, let's say. But in general, I think product marketeer are a perfect fit for that.
So once you've got the go-ahead, how do you start to build your team, and what sort of skills and attributes are you looking for?
That's I think it's probably the most important part now. Now that you have the project, let's say, and you need to start, it depends on the company, it depends on the maturity stage. But like, if you assume, let's say, a tech company with the product-driven, like a product-driven organization, the most important one and the first to kind of hire is usually some sort of insight/research professional. So you need to do research in an ongoing basis when you do a launch. First, you need to do, of course, research to understand the market, the consumer, the competitors, but then you need to do ongoing testing to understand if what we're actually building and bringing to the market is the right thing, and both on a product level and a communication level. So that's the first one. And a second one that I find very important as well is to have some sort of, I personally call it solution engineer, but sometimes it's a sort of project manager with technical skills as well as soft skills. This figure is very important, I think, not only to drive the project, but also to be able to discuss with the product teams and engineers on requirements as well as blockers, and come back to me or who is leading the project in a simple and digestible way. Because like sometimes we don't have the technical understanding of some products we're building, or at least not the full. So that's the second main person/area that I think it's important in a team. Then there is the creative/marketing, which is partially on us as product marketeer, but we need a strong partner in the marketing team to build actual communication on this. And last but not least, it's not a team, it's not part of the team, but as we mentioned before, like your C-level buy-in or your leads buy-in, it's extremely important to sponsor this.
So when once your team's in place, how do you attribute roles and responsibilities? Is that a natural follow-on from the structure or size of your organization?
I would say sometimes it's natural, sometimes it's not, but it's always related to the first step, which is setting up a clear objective and inspiring objectives. It's not enough to say, I want to bring product X to market Y. It's important to say, how are we doing this in an inspiring way, in a concrete way that it's achievable, as well as setting clear milestones so that the team is really on board and they feel part of it. And then after that, it's kind of natural on how each one has a clear responsibility area. But I would say that sometimes, or many times in a launch, you have to work with other teams and other functions that are not directly reporting to you. And that's the hardest part. And to do that, to clarify responsibility, to give accountability and ownership to other teams, it's important to start the dialogue very early on. So to kick off the project, even if it's not fully defined, to kick off the project early on, to start discussion, to involve them and the other team, so that there is some sort of sense of belonging, which will make responsibility and ownership very, very clear. But then you need to write it down, which is the most important part.
So how difficult is it to set a timeline that takes into account everyone's individual roles in the product and the launch?
That's the hardest part, because I've never experienced a launch without a delay or without things changing while we go. So I would say this is really the hardest part. You have multiple stakeholders, you have multiple dependencies. So sometimes to deliver a feature, you need someone else to deliver another feature. So to communicate a feature, you need to deliver that feature, right? So it's all dependencies. So the most important part is to map them at the very beginning, and to try to define an MVP, so a specific product that you will go to the market with, and clear milestones. Because I've had many times where we discussed about the product, we defined a proposition of this product, and then something fundamental changed, and we were not in control of it, and everything else was dependent from that. So it's very, very important to have like some sort of roadmap where you are mapping really the dependencies and are controlling them on a at least weekly basis.
Mm-hmm. So where do you start when you're building your launch plan, and what OKRs would you prioritize at the beginning?
I usually start, I mean, it depends on the project, of course, and on the launch, but I usually start with two key questions. One is really, by when do we want to deliver something? Like having at least a time frame in mind, and what are we building? Because like it's wrong to start from the communication, I would say. You need to have direction, of course, but it's wrong to start from how do we market this? It should go hand in hand. So from these two questions, I usually start with the research, both internal and external, right? So it's like, okay, where, what kind of capabilities do we have as a company to do this? Is it a regulated product? Do we need to involve other teams for this? So usually you have this kind of two big question that you want to answer. So it's like, by when do we want to deliver, and what do we want to build? And these two are usually helping also setting the objective, because I think that OKRs or goals, or whatever we want to call it, like some sort of clear objectives, are crucial. And in a product launch, you have the project management side of it and the product side of it. So I usually have product OKRs, meaning how many credit card do we want to issue in a specific market by a specific time, or how much transactions. I'm talking about banking now because I worked in the past years, but how many transactions do we want to have until end of 2020, for example? And then you have project OKRs, which are always or very often underestimated. So a timely deliver of the project to me is very important. And the second one is stakeholder satisfaction, meaning that we do retro after projects where we discuss how this, what can we change, what can we improve, and so on and so forth. To me, these two, let's say, project OKRs are also super important and often underestimated.
Okay, so under what circumstances should you consider changing your launch plan? And would you advise having a backup plan in place?
Like as I told you, I've never had a perfect launch. Never had and never heard of. So I don't think it exists. And therefore, I think you can have the best plan in the world. There will always be something that will go wrong. Like it's big, small, I don't know, but something don't go as planned. Part of the game. I mean, it's how it works, and I think that's also the beauty of it, because it would be boring otherwise, right? So this is why I think the product marketeers need to be super flexible with these things. And regarding your question of having a backup plan, I personally think it's a bit of a waste of energy to have a full backup plan, but it's important to have maybe several small backup plans for specific pivotal decisions that are important, I would say.
Okay, so what would you consider to be the most common go-to-market mistakes, and how can we avoid making them?
I mean, I've done many, so I have a lot of examples. But stakeholder misalignment is the worst. Stakeholder misalignment, meaning that if your stakeholders in a project are not informed, or they don't agree with some specific, again, pivotal decision, it's going to cost the project. It happened to me in the past that we didn't involve some specific team, some regional team. I was in a global team and we didn't involve a regional team, and we we had an alignment quite late in the project. We were almost ready to launch, and they put let's say a red flag into one thing that we didn't thought of. So I would say that's the biggest risk. And how to, like, after I made that, I've started to have like some sort of plan to not do that again. And like early check-ins, as I mentioned in the beginning, like even if the project plan is not fully ready, it's important to have early check-in with important stakeholders. Review sessions, constant discussions, and full transparency. Sometimes we work in our bubble as individuals. We work in our bubble, maybe a small team, but then we don't realize that we need to have full transparency, even though it's not the thing that you can present is not fully ready. I think it's really important.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about alignment in that last question. So how do you align and prepare your team pre-launch?
Yeah, it's a bit related to the previous question. As you mentioned, it's about setting the right goals, I would say, and making sure that these are inspiring and that the team is excited about it. So it's really creating this sense of belonging and this journey that we're doing together to bring something to life, which is I think it's very good when you, like, the feeling that you have after you've done a launch, like a product launch, it's incredible. And this sense of belonging and excitement, I think it's half of the work. Because if you have chosen the right people in the team, I think the rest is going to be really automatic. And then, of course, you need to keep constant alignment and communication. And we have usually, even though we're not a product team, so I work in product teams, but I'm as a product marketeer. But we use some sort of ways of working that are typically related to product teams, such as we do stand-ups every few days, we do bi-weekly plannings, we do weekly retros, and so on and so forth. So this constant communication with the core team, I think it's extremely important.
Okay, so we talked about getting the product team excited about the launch. So a question we see quite frequently in the Slack community is, how do we get sales excited about the launch? Do you have any tips on how to structure training in a way that keeps people engaged?
I've personally worked very little with sales team, but I think that they're just a stakeholder like another, let's say. So they have a clear goal, which is probably increase sales, right? So usually it's always about aligning what you're doing or making sure that what you're doing is aligned with their goal. So as a first step, and to make them excited, it sounds bad to say, but it's, if you're contributing to their goals, they're going to be excited. And second is really to keep them engaged. You need to keep them in the loop, but not only informing them, but getting input. So they need to feel part of what we're doing rather than informed, So I think that's the real, that's a very important part.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us, Giuseppe. It was really lovely to speak to you.
Same, likewise. It was nice being here.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Product Marketing Off-Piste. We're sure you're enjoying the presentations from our guest speakers so far. We're enjoying playing host, and the good news is we've even more talks coming up. But before we throw even more grade A content your way, we want to take a moment to thank every person who's contributed to making Off-Piste a worthy addition to the product marketing calendar. Sponsors, partners, speakers, and of course every product marketer who is registered and tuned in. Enjoy the talk.
In some ways, things are kind of the same.
People are dropping off.
In other ways,
The screen's too slow.
well,
Fluffy, seriously?
We still got a couple things just to polish this up.
the good news is we've learned we can do this.
Any questions?
Hello?
Okay, let's run through the sign-up flow. I really like how clean it is.
Turns out when we're hitting our goals, nobody cares if we're wearing pants. We just need the right tools. So our team stays a team. So no matter what comes next, we know we can work better, do better. This is going to work.
Welcome everybody to our PMA session, Journeys into Product Marketing. My name is Sondren van Arreda, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's session. I'm very excited. I'm with a lot of amazing talent that has come from an assortment of different backgrounds and experiences. Vanessa Thompson is with us, Angus, Helena, and they're all going to be speaking to kind of their journeys and their path into product marketing. And what was super interesting is coming out of the PMA report, State of Product Marketing Report 2020, we saw there is a lot of different product marketers coming from various realms of different backgrounds. 43% came from marketing, 12% came from product, some people came from sales, from customer success, but there's this whole other bucket, almost 35% from this other bucket. So you have product marketers from different backgrounds and experiences coming into this role and doing really amazing things. Some titles I'll mention out right now I thought was super interesting. Validation engineer, flight attendant, designer, teaching assistant, events manager, a principal, US Navy submarine officer. So lots of different cool backgrounds for product marketers. So I want to introduce you to the panel here today, and I'll start with Vanessa to give a quick intro.
Thank you so much for the intro. I'm really excited to be here and share my journey into product marketing. I kind of just stumbled into product marketing because I had a friend that said, hey, you would be really good at this based on your background. So to share kind of my story of my background, I'm originally from New Zealand, so that's probably the accent that you detect a little of. I started out working in some government and banking projects in kind of quote unquote the business of technology on a big networking project, and then sort of a large scale kind of retail banking technology. I then kind of found myself at a point where I was sort of really early in my career and needed to figure out what to do next. And I just spun the wheel of fortune and applied for a few different roles and ended up landing a role as an analyst at an industry research firm called IDC, which is probably many of the product marketers on this call have heard about IDC before. I started out there as the analyst covering Australia and the software market, which is huge and broad, built up a team over there, and then sort of in an 18-month time frame, moved to the US to take on a research portfolio around collaboration and social software. I spent about 5 years at IDC in the US, and over time kind of built my practice to also include things like customer experience and experiences in general. Worked my way up into a VP role there. and then ended up somehow in customer experience consulting. So I did a few different projects there, working at a firm called Blue Wolf, which was eventually acquired by IBM. So after about a year working as a consultant there, trying to really understand what was going on the ground level with our customers, I then moved into the Twilio business to start up the marketing function for the IoT business unit. I've now moved inside Twilio. So after about a year working on the IoT business, I moved into looking after product marketing for all of our core businesses. So that means messaging, voice, video, SIP trunking, email, and account security. So I've been doing that for almost 2 years here. I've got an awesome team. I'm really happy to have them, and I've learned a ton, and I feel like I'm a better product marketer for understanding and having all of these different experiences that have taken me on this journey. So yeah.
Interesting. Nice. Angus.
All right. Well, I guess I'm part of the majority that came from marketing. Although I've kind of been in and out of a number of different roles in marketing. And so I've seen, it's funny to me because for me, I always considered myself a marketer, and having seen kind of product marketing shift out as its own function. And once I kind of discovered more about that, I was like, this is the place where I need to be, because it made a lot of sense over the span of my career when you look at it. Because about 20 years ago, when I was coming out of college, I went into consulting. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was an anthropology major, which, had I known better, would have aligned way better to marketing and product marketing, but I had no idea at 22. So I ended up in this consulting role, realized it was not what I enjoyed. And I ended up talking to a lot of marketers, realized it was kind of my tribe, and ended up going, working for an ad agency. Did that, went to business school, and then went client side, doing some balance of marketing and product marketing. We're launching phones globally for Samsung. And then I kind of moved out of that and I went into product innovation. So went actually more to the product side, and spent 4 years doing that, and then came back into more of these kind of product manager, product marketing sort of roles, and have been doing that for Logitech and a couple of startups since then. And it pulls together a number of these different areas. It's funny because, 10 years ago, I would have considered myself a pure marketer. And with the time in product innovation and those pieces, I've actually come much closer to the product side, and have actually developed a lot more skills there. And honestly, I've lost some of the more of the skills around pure marketing from that perspective, because technology is changing so fast. But it's interesting because I've been around all those different areas, and the reason I enjoy kind of product marketing the most is really, it actually goes back to the anthropology piece and understanding who the customers are and really being that voice of the customer. And that, there wasn't a role that existed 10 years ago either. And so to now have that be at the forefront and to have more awareness, both here, but also in just organizations, to say, we really do need this. So I've been enjoying the ride.
Sounds good. Helena.
Great. Well, it's so wonderful to be here and hear everyone's journeys and stories. We're also unique. And in my case, I started with a percentage who came from the development side of the house. I started my career with deep technical roots, both academically and professionally. I have a master's of engineering and computer science from Columbia University, followed by a master's, almost PhD in computer science from the University of California at Berkeley. And so no surprise, I started my career as a software developer and quickly became an engineering manager and system architect. And in part of that role, I was brought into many, many sales meetings. I presented at many conferences. I realized the power, the impact, and the importance of translating technology concepts and complex concepts into understandable and relevant messaging that our customers and prospects could understand and relate to. And I found that I truly loved describing and telling stories to trigger what I call the light bulb moment, where I can inspire people to have a sudden realization of how much value and benefit our product and solution can bring to them. Both to their businesses and also sometimes even in their personal as well as their professional lives. And so I changed careers from engineering into product marketing. I've also held roles in growth marketing, leading marketing teams, and always bringing with me this passion to inspire others. And it's from this is how I've driven quite a bit of growth and success at both early stage startup companies, very large established companies as well. And so that's my story.
Nice. And I see there's lots of common threads between us all on that path. A little bit of my background. I was an accountant previously. And, you know, I had an education in accounting. I loved everything about business and finance and growing a business. When I was going through that, you know, I started my own business and I started up a YouTube channel. And there was that point, it's like, I love telling stories. I love messaging. I love positioning. I loved all these things. So I kind of did a complete 180 with my career. Had an opportunity at Microsoft Canada, did some marketing operations there, leveraging some of my financial background, and slowly started working with the product marketing team there. And that's when I found, you know, this is my jazz. I love doing this. And it was a little bit of a pivot for a lot of people externally that saw this. But I remember even in my accounting days, closing the month end with my journal entries, people would come up to me and be like, Sondren, what are you doing here doing this? You know, you can do it, go into sales, go into marketing or something. And, you know, that's just where my passion is. And I still have a lot of my accountant friends and I love accounting. I do my own taxes. So there's no harm there. But yeah, I feel, you know, I think all of us, and I hear the different stories, all of our backgrounds bring different experiences and skills that actually help us in our role significantly. And actually it was kind of, I want to tie it to a question, and maybe I'll point this to Vanessa and Angus, is like, what skills do you think that you had in your previous lives that came into your product marketing role that you found extremely valuable and set you up for success?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to me because I would say there's a couple of different types of skills. There are some core things which, you know, it's come up a bunch around, you know, translating what the product is into actual messaging. And I feel like there's a lot around that. There's a lot around storytelling. It's funny though, because that's also something that's hard to describe. Oh, that's the skill, because I've been in enough roles where everyone thinks they're a marketer. And so, but those are the core things. The number of times I've had to rewrite decks to say, you know, are we being customer driven first? Do we even know who our customers are? Like, there are a lot of skills that are around that just core foundation of who are your customers, what does the product do, and why does this actually matter to the customers? Not, oh, this is this feature, but why does it actually matter to customers? And so for me, those have been some of the kind of the core skills. Yes, there's plenty of, you know, okay, managing Asana and, you know, dealing with various kind of like platforms is critical. But then I find myself a lot of times in Google Docs, and it's just around like, are we creating the right story here? Are we creating the right level of content? And there's, you know, I would say often that's 50 or 70% of my time is creating content, creating the right stories to drive something forward. And so, yes, a lot of that ties back to previous roles I had. You know, if it's, okay, how are you working with the engineering team? Are you part of enough meetings so that you really understand what the product does, not just, you know, at a cursory level? Are you understanding who the consumer is, and, you know, what types of research will get that right? So there are core skills that drive down to that. But when I think about what the output is, it's really focusing on those different output pieces and what skills will drive that.
Yeah, I love that, Angus. I think the balancing input and output, and, you know, particularly for me at Twilio, we are, you know, our product is pretty technical. Like, we sell APIs, we don't sell packaged software. And so if we think about our main customers who are developers, they're very, you know, input output driven. And so if we think about all of the things that we do as product marketers, just making sure that we're balancing, you know, qual and quant. Are we able to follow along with an architect or a developer in a conversation, translate that then to even a line of business decision maker inside that same customer, and make sure that we're building the bridge ourselves and mapping together the, you know, here's what the developer is going to do and here's what the outcome looks like for that line of business person. And I think, you know, to me, the skill there, it's really interesting. It's one of those like serendipitous skills that you just pick up over time, the ability to translate and distill a complex concept into something that makes sense for your customer, whomever that customer is, whether it's your sales team, whether it's your product team, whether it's your, ultimate end user. I think if just that core concept that we don't spend enough time around truly codifying for product marketers, I don't think, that ability to just simplify instead of complicate. I think we've done it on the product, build your product simply, right? There's a bunch of content and info out there in the universe on that, but not for product marketers, right? We need to take something that's often complex and complicated and convoluted and make it not so. And that's often harder than just kind of translating it as is. And so, yeah, that's kind of an interesting one that I would say. And then, another thing that for me personally that I've brought into my role in product marketing, I spent so many years as an industry analyst balancing between qual and quant. And by that, I mean, you need to not only truly understand what the numbers mean, for us as marketers, what does our pipeline mean? What does the TAM mean? What do all of these numbers mean to us? And then how can I also, on the other side, quickly turn that into something that's meaningful and that has an impact? And so it could be tactical, hey, there's some new market news that we need to get out. And that's you being a journalist, but as a product marketer, you're a great writer and you can communicate your thoughts clearly. But it also could be what is the macro thought leadership thing that we want to put out there, and what do we truly want to own as a business, and how do we kind of wrap our arms around that and make it work? And so I think there's definitely some common threads, as you said earlier, around some of the things that all of us have learned in our previous roles that help us be better product marketers.
And you talked about, sorry, go ahead, Angus.
I was just going to say there are a couple of things that are, you're just, because product marketing works with so many different functions, there's just some inherent people skills. You've got to be able to align with the engineering team. You've got to be able to align with your PR team and agencies. And so there's a lot around pulling those different pieces together, influencing without authority. There's just core kind of people skills from that side. And then, to the other point, and I've always found product marketing has this spectrum as to, which part is inbound and which part is outbound. So inbound is influencing the product, is saying, this is what we need to build, and bringing that side in from one perspective. And the outbound side is, okay, this is what the product does. Now, how do we message this in the right way? Depending on the company, depending on how technical it is, depending on how market driven it is where you're going to be on that spectrum. And so it's, in some roles, I've actually had to wear more of a product manager type hat. And then in other roles, it's more, okay, this is all about just getting in the right channels. This is about creating content and pushing things out. And so the skills will absolutely vary by how technical the product is and where you are kind of on that spectrum of inbound and outbound.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think, Vanessa was talking about maybe, and we saw almost 13% of product marketers came from product, right? And maybe because they have that deep understanding of maybe a more technical product and they end up shifting into product marketing. That makes sense. So there's that in terms of what the product is. But I also think another aspect that we need to think about is the maturity of the business. I've seen what product marketing looks like at major software companies, but I've also experienced myself firsthand what product marketing looks like at a 500-person company and at a 100-person company. And I think, some of the skills that I'm looking for at that point is maybe not necessarily previous experiences, but kind of what other qualitative or quantitative skills that they have in terms of, being a self-starter, being able to learn if you're just thrown into the water very quickly, and pick up and self-manage by yourself. Because we see it's honestly astonishing to me that there is such a varied background of experiences for the people that come into this role. And it's super exciting. And, Helena, you talked about hiring and building out teams. What are those things? If it's not product oriented, maybe it's something that's very technical. You're not looking for someone that came out of product organization. What are those other things in their background are you looking for when hiring?
I think a lot is very important, ranging from, and you briefly touched on this, someone who's adaptable, somebody who's a problem solver. We all, in product marketing, I think especially, we face new and different challenges every day, and we're solving either unique problems in a unique way, or there's some unique aspect. There's some way for all of us in our jobs, the problem has never been solved. This is not a cookie cutter mechanistic position in the company. I think though the number one most important thing I look for is that every person has to be customer centric and customer focused. And I say both centric and focused because one is an outside in and the other is the vice versa perspective. You got to be able to see through the lens of the customer. What do they need? What do they want? What do they care about? What type of messaging is going to resonate with them? You can't force on them, how awesome your product is. You got to speak to it and communicate in a way that's going to be meaningful and significant to them. And then also, as briefly touched on, more from that, outbound perspective to also, build your assets and your sales enablement training so it's relevant to them. So I think this is, if I had to pick one, of course I want 10 things for every person to have, but if I had to pick one, I'd say this is the most important critical skill. And it's important because the product, your overall marketing and your sales team, all have to be aligned and in sync for each specific customer audience. And, otherwise the product's irrelevant. Otherwise your go-to-market strategies are relevant. No matter how great it is, it's gotta be relevant to each audience. And so to drill down a bit, I'd say there's 3 areas that are very important. One, product marketing ideally owns the product roadmap. I know that varies by company. It can be, founder driven or sales driven. I see smiles around the Zoom call here. But as much as possible, own and guide the product roadmap and the development team to build the right product and capabilities for each audience segment. Then number 2, we've touched on this, the storytelling, crafting and communicating all the messaging so it's relevant to each audience, said in a way that's going to resonate, of course. And then 3, creating all the assets, the sales enablement, the sales training specific for each audience segment. So if you forced me to pick one, that's what I'd say: customer centric, customer driven, customer focused. And then of course I've got the the laundry list of everything else, and this has been touched on. I feel like in a lot of ways, product marketing is the heart of the organization, and we're at the center of it. And we touch so many different organizations in so many different ways, so that skill set to be able to effectively influence, because we're so important and yet we don't control. It's very much of an influence situation. So these softer skills are incredibly important, and maybe interesting I'm saying this since I come from the deep development side of the house. So that's my thinking.
Completely agree. And, I think, Angus, you mentioned this before, like something that's so important is messaging, positioning, the storytelling. And I'll be just very transparent. Like when I was coming out of accounting, was that my thing? No, it wasn't. I had to go ahead and really double down on that and learn from other avenues to build that, joining PMA, to learn and build this muscle, when maybe my strength was, yes, I came from an accounting background. Do I have a better sense of analyzing data, analyzing the pipeline, your lead performance and all this stuff? That's where I broke into. And, I think those stories about where you break into product marketing is really cool. But then how do you, build up the rest of your skill sets to become a real good product marketer that knows how to build positioning and messaging that's going to resonate with your audience really effectively? So if there's one word of guidance I'd say to anybody looking to break into product marketing from whatever background you have is, don't be afraid that you have to go and learn these new things, right? There's different avenues. There's different ways you can go ahead and build that learning, but at least you're coming from one position of strength. Lean on that first. That's what I did, and continue to build and grow.
And, to that point, when I was talking to a few startups recently, and all right, what are your second and third hires? This was kind of entertaining interview questions that I'd gone through. And often it was to say, well, I'm going to look in 2 or 3 different directions, because it's rare that you're going to find the generalist product marketer that can do all of it. It's like, look, I either want someone who's driving a lot of content, or I want someone who's doing more growth. And I'll take either and I'll work on the other one. And most likely you'll get some level of agency help, both when you're big and when you're really small, because you're not going to hire a team of 5 when you're small. And when you are, a 500 or 1,000 person company, then you have other people who can help on a larger team. But it is, I think this idea of being customer centric that's just also there. I love this line. I think it was from some Gartner research that I looked at was a customer is more likely to buy from you if you can describe what their problem is. So they don't actually care about what your software solution is. This is more focused on B2B SaaS, but it's relevant to just about everything. If you can describe what their problem is, they're more likely to trust you. And if they're more likely to trust you, they're more likely to listen to what product you have to offer them. Because the expectation is that product will then match some of those needs. And so that being kind of core foundation, and all of us do this to some degree in our own lives, of trying to empathize, trying to understand what someone else is going through. And you know, it was really interesting to have someone from Clorox, this was back in business school, you know, they were showing a video of one of their customers. And I remember posing the question to them saying, what if you did this in the interview process? Just show a video of your customer and see what people pick out on it. It's a good way of just testing how much are you actually trying to listen and learn from the customer. Because if you do put that front and center, and if you find ways to kind of test and validate that, you're more likely to be able to, all the other things will come from that. But you do have to make every effort you can, whether that's listening to sales calls, whether that's, you know, and even for me, whether it's I'm on the sales call or I'm having weekly meetings with sales teams, I want to hear as close to the customer perspective as I can. Or it's going on to, you know, messaging boards, seeing what people are saying. There's so many different avenues to pick this different stuff up and to say, what percentage of your time are you spending doing this? Because you can spend lots of times just focused on internal, what the product does. You can spend lots of time focused on these 4 asks that we need to develop to say, all right, let me make sure I'm carving out 20% of my time to just hear what people are saying.
To build on what you just said, Gartner has this great article called literally, most marketing sucks, but there's hope. But there's hope. And they talk about the Gartner storytelling approach, which we've all been touching on. And it's exactly what you just said. You lead with first understanding their problem, and you don't lead with your product. And then you talk about how, the value you can bring to them in their exact business scenario. And so then it's relevant to them. It's not some abstract concept. It's what exactly you can do for them. So I love that. And I think we're all talking about ways here that we can stop marketing from sucking.
So if we take a step back, sorry, Vanessa, I was actually going to pose this question to you on this. As we think about these traits and these different skills for product marketers and what we think, that journey looks like in the future, Vanessa, this is a great question. In terms of your skill traits and what you've brought to the table from your background, what do you think will continue to be valuable for you, even more so going forward as the role evolves?
Yeah, great follow on from the previous discussion here, because I think, I spent a while as a customer experience consultant. And if we're thinking about, Helena mentioned customer centricity, customer focus, well, ultimately to me, it's the 30,000 foot view, the 10,000 foot view, and then, overlaying our circle of control and the circle of concern, right? So as a product marketer, I recognize that we can't solve everything, but what we can solve for and what we have the ability to solve for is a ton of surface area that the customer will see and touch before they've bought something, or even after they've bought something and they've come back, right? So I think, one of the skills for me is bringing pragmatism to discovery around what's going on with the customer. Because I think, another term that gets thrown around in our circles is empathy. And I'm not sure I truly agree that building empathy makes sense. To me, because I'm a pragmatist, I prefer rational compassion. And to Angus's point about explaining the problem in clear terms, I think if you can truly say we show up and we understand that this is the problem, and I get that it's hard because, I think to me that actually goes a long way in terms of building a bridge, instead of saying oh yeah, I think there's some sort of more fluffy, way that we could potentially solve this problem. Getting pragmatic, getting specific, and I've got a bit of a personal pet hate for weasel words like better, faster, all of these things that I'm sure you're all probably similar to me in that you kind of take that approach. But yeah, in terms of my skills and background and the things that I will always lean on as a marketer now, like, and I can truly say, like, I've been a marketer for almost 3 years, so I truly feel like a marketer now. I will take that experience as a CX consultant all the way through, and making sure that I'm truly representing customers in the right way, trying to build that kind of shared or like peer-oriented value, right? Like things like customer stories we haven't touched on, or like customer references. Just saying like, hey, this is a logo and they use us isn't very helpful. If you can describe the problem in the context of another business, you instantly build a connection to like, hey, I know that brand, they had the same problem as me and they use this company. Wow, okay. So that's kind of another way to approach the problem there. And that's all kind of due to my experience in customer experience. Yeah.
One thing that hasn't been talked on as much, but probably will become more important, is analytics.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a little about the quant and the qual, but even as you look at the customer journey, how well are we able to actually map and track these different things back? If a lot of the things we're talking about are understanding the customer to some degree, and a lot of that is a little more qual versus saying, how did our campaigns work? And are we comfortable with this? I mean, there was the joke back in the day of 50% of my marketing budget is wasted. The problem is I don't know which 50%. We are getting better at analyzing, and I've watched this. I mean, that was kind of the start of my career, was much more in analytics, and I switched over. I didn't talk about that quite as much, but I actually was doing early days of web analytics and typing SQL queries in an Oracle database. That was my consulting role to start, was a lot of that. So I do think there's going to be more around that, and I keep waiting to see it kind of really improve, but I've seen kind of slow bits and pieces as marketing has become a little bit more technical and analytical. I still think there will always be the creative side. There will always be the kind of qualitative side. And, but then how do we measure it? How are we starting to kind of analyze it over time? Especially as the market becomes more mature. I think as the market's not mature, then we often don't have we don't even have customers to talk to in the same way. And that's actually one thing I wanted to quickly touch on, is that dealing with adjacencies and substitutes, and what can I look at that's maybe a totally different market, but that gives me some level of understanding of what this customer might go through. So I think there is, and that's probably market analysis and competitive and those different pieces, which I'm sure you did just a bit on IDC. I do think a couple of those different pieces will be critical moving forward. As product marketing becomes more and more defined, then it's, okay, how are we measuring and monitoring this? Because I don't feel like that's really being done. I mean, I still think between organizations, there's a different description of what product marketing does. So it's gonna be much harder to say, okay, this is how I know whether it's working or not. But it feels like we will absolutely get there.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. And you mentioned the spectrum earlier, and I do think that every company is on their own path, and they have kind of I guess you could call it the polarity of where product marketing is kind of attaching themselves to. And in that regard, I do think the way that we measure ourselves has to be more aligned with your orientation in the organization. And so I think that makes sense. On the way that we analyze our spot in the universe, I think, from a full company or product perspective, there's a ton of interesting ways that you can do that now without just TAM data, and by using, some of the newer tools like G2 Crowd and like all of those kinds of things that help you build like a more fuller picture of what's going on and what the edges of one market look like versus another, or how do you create your own one that doesn't exist today. And I think that's a really interesting problem that we as product marketers can solve. And I think the other thing that's kind of more of an interest to me, and what I did when I was working as a customer experience consultant too, was we spent a ton of time doing journey analytics on like a a client would come to us and say, hey, we have a problem with our funnel. People are dropping out here. We don't know why. Can you help us figure it out? And we would go and like map out the customer journey. And then we would try and model like what the impact to the business is and what the options for changing it were. And so what was interesting, when I first picked up my role, I found a problem like this that was going on in our business. And I kind of took the same approach. And instead of kind of circling around trying to figure out how to fix it, we just like found a single problem in our sign up flow, and we were like, okay, that's the problem, let's go fix that. And with some product marketing, we were able to solve a problem that we were kind of not really sure how to even start thinking about. And so I agree, Angus. I think that's definitely something we should all keep in the back of our minds, like the model for measurement, whether we think it's the macro market model, like our percentage of market share, whether we think it's our percentage of, attribution to the pipeline, whether we think it's, I don't know, number of product features or even patents or something like that, right? Like it just truly depends on your company and where you think your alignment lies. Yeah.
To jump into the conversation as well, I passionately agree. I've always been very data driven, and now that so much of the customer journey and also the everything that the sales team does, for instance, is online, is part of the whole part of a digital experience. It is so much easier to build a dashboard, which is something that I've been working on, to map the entire customer journey, to find friction, reduce friction. It's also fascinating not only to pick out the key performance, indicators and key metrics, because if you look at it all, you're going to get overwhelmed. And then it's also interesting to drill down. You can really find areas that are broken and a lot of low-hanging fruit to fix to improve everything. So whether it's looking at website analytics, how much time are folks spending on the pages? Are they getting lost? Are they getting to the right content? Looking at data from your marketing automation systems. Tools like HighSpot, you can see what sales is actually using.
Love HighSpot.
Yeah, can they give it a thumbs up, thumbs down? How much are they sharing it? How much are they presenting it? You can really tell what's useful, and then figure out, did something that you produced that you thought would be fantastic to just get lost and sales isn't aware of it, or are they not finding value, or vice versa? There could be high value assets that you didn't realize would be as impactful and powerful as they are, and you can build on those successes. So, I just love the fact that we have so much more visibility and data than we ever had before.
Hearing you three speak about all this, you obviously see the trends, and when we see that state of the product marketing report, where all these people came from, you see the storytelling, how important it is. People coming from a more direct marketing background. You see the voice of the customer, customer-centric background, people from CS, customer experience, et cetera. You see the data analysis and the results-oriented of looking at, you put $1 in, you get $10 out, like that background. And I think that the fact that product marketers need to have this assortment of skill sets kind of speaks to why so many people come from these varied industries to come into product marketing, and they kind of start on that one and expand out into the others. Which is really interesting. To wrap up this, I think this was a great conversation. Lots of different journeys to product marketing. I want to say thank you, Helena, Angus, Vanessa, for being on this panel. Really appreciated hearing your stories. Definitely reach out to us if you have any questions about the journeys, and we'd be happy to answer them. Thank you guys very much, and hope you guys enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're back for more specialist insights, welcome to Product Marketing Off-Piste. Before we begin, we want to say a thank you to our sponsors and partners for helping us bring this awesome event to life. We're sure you'll enjoy it. And if you're on the lookout for more resources, our Slack community is home to a bunch of contributions from thousands and thousands of fellow product marketers. So if you're not already a member, join the debate, but for now, enjoy the presentation.
In some ways, things are kind of the same.
People are dropping off.
In other ways,
The screen's too slow.
well,
Fluffy, seriously?
We still got a couple things just to polish this up.
the good news is we've learned we can do this.
Any questions?
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, let's run through the sign-up flow. I really like how clean it is.
Turns out when we're hitting our goals, nobody cares if we're wearing pants. We just need the right tools. So our team stays a team. So no matter what comes next, we know we can work better, do better. This is going to work.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Wherever you are in the world, thank you so much for taking the time to attend my presentation on the 5 secrets to get your buyers to choose you. My name is Nikita Ajmera, and I'm a product marketing consultant at IBM. Now, before I begin today's presentation, I'm going to start with a story about audience. This photo was taken in 2017 when I was a student at the University of Michigan. Me and my peers are on stage dancing, and we're trying to propel an audience base of over a couple hundred people who are students at the university to stand for 24 hours without sitting, all to raise funds and awareness for kids in need of pediatric rehabilitation therapy. Now, why am I telling this story? The reason it was so important for us to understand our audience is because we took time to think about what our base cared about. As college students, we had to really think about how to get these people to our event and to target them via strategies on digital and social media. In the end, because we understood our base, our audience, we were able to fundraise over $420,000 for the kids for local hospitals. This goes to show the incredible results that can come when you understand your audience. Now, of course, in 2020, things are very different. We're social distancing, trying to be safe in this global pandemic, and our audience is virtual. We're having these virtual conferences and virtual meetings, even virtual runs. But nevertheless, even though the context is different, it is so important to understand those people who we are serving in any context. Now, of course, this idea is very similar, going from a college event to the corporate setting of business to business, where our audience is our buyers, whether it's a CTO, a CIO, a COO, understanding that person, what motivates them, what keeps them up at night, what they care about, can truly make the difference at the end of the day. But don't just listen to me. Why does knowing our buyers really matter with the data? Let's look to the State of Product Marketing Report 2020. The interesting part of this report is that it surveyed many product marketers about customer interaction. However, an interesting statistic is that only 34.2% of those product marketers said that they talk to buyers a handful of times a month. This shows that it's so important for us to be educated on this topic of buyers, who they are, how to target them, what makes them tick, because we are the voice of the customer, and it is up to us as product marketers to really understand our audience. In addition, it's so clear from this report, from these quotations that were said, on the importance of knowing your customer, on seeing them on social media, whether it's subscribing to their newsletters, and then being friends with them, really understanding their journey. It's very clear, not only through personal experience, but also through data, that understanding our buyers is a priority. So, without further ado, let's begin. Audience Demystified, the 5 secrets to get your buyers to choose you. I'm so excited to give this presentation. I'm originally from the Midwest, grew up in Ohio, and I went to school at the University of Michigan. I've since moved to New York, and I am IBM proud, having gone from going blue to the big blue. And I'm so passionate about product marketing and all of these topics, so it's really an honor to be here on your virtual computer screen to share a lot of the things that I've learned. But of course, I would be nothing without my wonderful team at IBM. We're small, but we're mighty. And we're driven by a pragmatic approach, thinking about the market and thinking about execution, whether it's strategic or whether it's tactical, but really understanding this strategy and how we do our product marketing. So let's get into the agenda for today. I mentioned 5 secrets, and here they are. First, validating your segment, really understanding how to target your audience and identifying behaviors. After that, I'm going to take you through the importance of identifying what you know and don't. This is a huge secret where we look to audience analytics, data points, and dashboards to see how we can understand our market. The third secret is putting it to the test. By preparing and executing buyer interviews, I'll take you through strategies and best practices of even questions to ask your buyers. The fourth secret, filling the gaps, identifying blockers and solutions. There are many issues that can arise when you're trying to contact your buyer or when you're trying to even start the process of understanding your audience. So I'll take you through some recommended solutions that my team has brainstormed. And finally, the last secret, iterating and revising. Think about what works and doesn't. Think about how to tailor and how to be current. In this virtual environment, as I mentioned, it is even more challenging to really understand our buyers and to carve out time when we're remote, working from home, and we have so many priorities to really schedule these buyer interviews. But I'm going to take you through some strategies that I recommend that would work best. So first, let's begin. Why is it so important to understand audience? Well, it's data, and I'm going to take you through data in many different forms. But first and foremost, data must be central to audience because we need to understand data in context of our first secret, which is validating your segment. In order to get your buyers to choose you, you have to really identify who those buyers are in the first place. And in order to do that, we recommend a targeting exercise where you can truly evaluate your market segment. It's so important to step back and to take a targeting exercise because you need to have a very clear definition of who you want to target. By looking internally and by looking externally at things like market size, opportunity trends, category spend, sales readiness, buyer knowledge, and solution readiness, we can take the time and research to ensure we are talking to the right person. We have to go beyond the buyer role, beyond titles, and think about that person who is making the key buying decision to make sure we can do effective product marketing. But beyond targeting, it's so essential to understand the behavior of our buying audience. And so in order to do so, we must know the buyer's journey. Discover, learn, try, buy, and advocate. By understanding these different parts of the journey and by really seeing things from the buyer's perspective, we can be more effective. But segmenting begins with having a strategy, with having a business plan. Of course, understanding the buyer is the first step of that puzzle, but it also comes into the picture as a domino effect, as the next portion is crafting a point of view in order to finally establish routes to market. Segmentation, although, also allows us to evaluate key buyer attributes. By segmenting and dividing our market into potentials, we can truly see key traits. We can see the best performing segment, the state of those segments, even look to sellers for feedback and evaluate the size of those segments that you can reach. Again, all of this is so important because we need to understand who our audience is and truly ensure through all of these exercises that we are talking to the right people. However, we must understand key characteristics on a deep level to understand our buyers. Buying decisions are very complex, and a lot of times we may have multiple buyers. This is a photo taken from Pragmatic Institute, where they describe 4 types of buyers: the economic, technical, functional, and influencer buyer. As you can see, these different buyers are highly motivated by very different factors. The economic buyer owning budget and really caring about those kinds of things. Technical, seeking compliance, functional, wanting help doing their job, and influencer, providing credibility and validation. As you can see, it goes beyond the title, it goes beyond the CIO, the COO. It's so important to truly understand that these people can be from many different areas and they can be multiple buyers in one kind of situation. In addition, it's important to use templates in order to collect relevant information about our buyers. This is something that I would suggest taking to your organization. If you're a product marketer and you're tasked with the challenge of identifying a persona for a given market or product, list out the top 5 obstacles that your buyer may have that are interfering with their success. Really think about, what their role is, that economic, functional, technical, influencer. Look to analyst report. Really collect this information again to segment and truly identify that you are talking to the right people. Now, I mentioned data must be central to audience for all of these reasons because we're using data to ensure that we're identifying the right market. However, data must take many forms and be found in many ways. This can be seen in our second secret, which is identify what you know and don't. In order to understand buyer behavior, we must identify what we know and don't by using analytics. Audience analytics can truly help us understand the information we have and gaps because it can provide so much helpful insight into the voice of our buyer. By having target audience and looking to tools in order to understand more, we can see very important metrics. Things like the job role, a buyer's industry, their individual newness, company performance, insights, status, data, etc., etc. Audience analytics can truly help us understand what we know and what we do not. In addition, it's so important to understand our buyers and identify what we know and don't by using another tool called empathy maps. Empathy maps force us to write down very helpful information about our buyers so we can truly see and understand their many different characteristics and perspectives. This empathy map that we've created with IBM divides what we can look to our buyers for into 4 different areas: who and what, identifying their audience segment, role, responsibility, what they do; influencers, what they hear and see in market; motivators and demotivators, the audience's pains or gains; and finally, behaviors, how they think, what they say, and what they do. By thinking about our audience in these 4 ways and really pulling it apart into 4 different forms, we're able to truly gain more insight into our market. We can understand who and what, see and hear, pains and gains, say, do, and think about this in a very structured, pragmatic, and logical approach. In addition, data must be verified by putting it to the test, which is the 3rd secret in order to get your buyer to choose you. In order to put it to the test, we must look at our buyers in the form of organizational tools in order to best prepare for interviews. Now that we've understood who our buyers are with our targeting and our segmenting, and we've validated what we know and don't with data such as tools and dashboards, the 3rd piece of this puzzle is executing a buyer interview. We must get the most out of these interviews by preparing effectively. So many times we'll go into buyer interviews and not know the right questions to ask and waste the time. But it's so important that we take a step back and we review the data in order to make a list of potential buyers, to really think about, again, who we're targeting and whether it's worth their time. Secondly, we have to decide which buyers are worth interviewing. And thirdly, we must contact the buyers. These are big secrets because often enough, we don't take the time to truly think about, in a purposeful way, who we're targeting. And to make that an ideal and realistic set, a lot of times we may have different attributes that we're looking for. So it's very important to first and foremost prepare. In addition, it's so important to make that list of potentials that I mentioned. I recommend connecting with your sellers or your business partners. They will have such a rich view into your target customer and provide you with really great context and data. Many times as product marketers, we don't know as much about our customers because we might not be talking to them every single day. So that's why it's so important to really leverage your sellers and business partners for their knowledge on your buyer. But you can also look to market research. Market research is so important, whether it's looking at competitive insights or really anything on surveys to interviews to really understand demographics. And finally, even sales pipeline reports, win-loss reports, and audience analytics tools. All of these can truly help us to make that list of potential buyers and attributes. We must also decide which buyer is best to interview. As part of this secret of putting it to the test with interviews, we must make sure that we think about who those buyers really are in the interviews. If we think of a win-loss program, we know that having the decision maker or the economic buyer is very important. However, a lot of times it is important to have that buyer that is interfacing with the sales team because they can truly provide very valuable information. It's truly essential to ask non-company centric questions to understand how your buyer thinks and feels on topics, as well as to interview different types of buyers, those who chose you and those who did not. Those who chose you, your customers, the win interview, are of course the easiest to get a hold of, but they won't really reveal anything too critical. So we avoid spending too much time and focus here. The loss interview is so important because that reveals the people who considered you but chose a competitor. So spend your time here. Understand what that compelling event was that made those buyers not choose you. And finally, interview those buyers who don't know you exist. These people will be very difficult to get a hold of, but if you can, you'll yield very important data on these buyers. In addition, we recommend being mindful of policies and logistics when contacting buyers. Work with buyers who made a buying decision within the last 3 to 6 months. Have it be fresh. Interview people before they start to implement the solution. And think about the tactical things, like how much time you're going to take for an interview. We recommend 20 to 30 minutes, calling prior, and really looking towards those sensitivity policies to ensure you're reviewing personal information in a way that's compliant. In addition to preparing the best interview questions possible for the best types of buyers, it's important to execute the interview with the right questions and organizing those in order to take those key insights away, to make sure that 30 minutes that you spend with the buyer is very useful and it yields you powerful information for you to do more effective product marketing. How do we organize insights? How do we ask incredible questions? I consider that you use the jobs to be done approach. This approach follows a really interesting framework that you can see on the right of the screen: define, locate, prepare, confirm, execute, monitor, modify, and conclude. When you're asking questions in your buyer interview, recommend first asking what you try to accomplish next, then What do you try to accomplish? And finally, what do you do next and why? In order to really make the most of the time, utilizing this framework in order to really understand your buyer is essential to the process. In addition, prepare a set of open-ended questions that reveal emotion and interest. A lot of times we'll go into buyer persona interviews and we'll ask very, very direct questions. However, some questions do not reveal emotion and insight. But if you ask a question like, when 2020 planning, what was top of mind for the year with your customers? You will get a lot of color into what your buyer cares about and what their challenges are, what keeps them up at night. However, do not forget to listen to the answers. As much as it's important as a product marketer, the voice of the customer, to ask powerful, important questions and to organize them in a way that makes sense, we must be active listeners, and we must not forget to think about that, as well as inquiring about their digital journey and demographic information. Finally, we must execute and organize these interviews with a framework. I recommend the 5 rings of buyer insight. This is possibly the biggest secret that I'll give away because it's an easy way to structure all the insights that you gain from your buyer interview. Now, the first ring is priority initiatives, and that is the compelling event. You understand after the interview the personal or organizational circumstances that made the buyer choose the decision they did. It tells you when buyers are receptive, and this really triggers their decision making. So organizing those quotations and insights in this category is very key. The second ring is success factors. A lot of times there might be in-depth operational or personal results that your buyer will expect from purchasing your solution. So in order to really label those success factors and to ask those questions in the interview, it's so important to truly understand the actual solutions capability that your buyer is looking for. The third ring is perceived barriers. In interviews, it's so important to understand those obstacles, those reasons that buyers may not consider your solution, and why competitors may have a better approach. This way, you can tell your product marketing team how they can improve and how your actual offering can be better in and of itself in order to rise above the competition and saturate the market. The fourth ring is the buyer journey. We must understand the behind-the-scenes story of our buyers and what they do to evaluate options when they're thinking about what decision they should make. What are those influences that are coming into their mind? And what are they considering? Finally, the fifth ring is decision criteria. It's so incredibly important to understand those specific attributes of the product, service, or solution that your buyer is considering. They might be comparing alternative approaches, and really knowing those specific attributes is key to really understanding what your buyer is looking for in their offering. Now, we must understand after all these steps that data has to be used to solve problems. That is very clear. However, it can be also used to fill in the gaps, which brings me to my fourth secret of how you can get your buyers to choose you. A lot of times, it's very hard to even get in contact with our buyers. And so I've listed some common challenges and recommended solutions in order to solve this challenge if you're having trouble even executing an interview. I can't push this enough because in a global pandemic, being virtual over Zoom, it may be incredibly more challenging this year. So what are those challenges? Let's talk about them. The first one may be access. Perhaps there is a challenge of even talking to your buyers because it's difficult to get in contact with them while sales and customer relationships have such a great relationship. And so it's difficult to generate leads. In that case, we recommend meeting with sales regularly. Develop a cadence for meetings and include those DDRs and those SDRs. By having regular meetings with sales, the people that are always interacting with your buyers and will know so much important information, you can establish trust, you can establish clarity, and you can share goals. Another challenge that we've heard from product marketers is that they have trouble even finding the right buyer in the first place. Things like personal information and privacy, it's hard to even track down a phone number and email, or even find the right buyer. It's hard to identify white space. It's hard to understand demographics, and old and legacy customers may have bias that skews results. In that situation, we really recommend turning to competitive intelligence. Look to the data to help you find the right buyer. If your organization doesn't have a competitive intelligence team, look at surveys, look at interviews, really look at external research in order to really think about new methods to find the correct buyer. And this goes back to that first part of the presentation that I went over on identifying and segmenting and targeting. Ensure you're talking to the right people, or else your time will be wasted. Finally, a common challenge we see is directing the interview. Talking versus listening, knowing the right questions to ask, and if there's more than one, ensuring all interviews are aligned prior to the actual interview itself. In this challenge, we recommend reviewing trainings. There are so many great leading external education programs out there in order to understand buyers. There are vendors that do this. There are books. The sky's the limit. So really recommend looking beyond the bounds of your internal organization. Think outside in and look outwards to really understand ways to get in touch with your buyer. In that notion, go beyond the interview. Maybe you have a lot of great insights that you pull out from interviewing a CIO. They tell you a lot about the compelling events. You understand a lot more about what their main goals are and what their main priorities are. But go beyond the interview. Maybe you don't even get to sit with the CIO. Maybe you don't even get to sit with your buyer. If that's the case, there are other ways to understand your audience, to get close to your buyers. First, maybe you could talk to your analyst relations team. Look at reports on your buyer and truly understand from a market perspective what's happening. You could also read about topics your buyers are interested in, looking at survey data by the competitive intelligence team. And finally, looking at search, web analytics, and campaign performance. This is a very important piece to understanding the events and content that may resonate with your buyer. Truly, if you don't have time for interviews, if it's difficult to get on the phone, look beyond the interview with these external and additional methods. Finally, the importance of data as it relates to audience, we've seen in many different forms. It's central to understanding them, to targeting, to segmenting, to even looking to make sure we have the right buyer, to even asking the right questions in the interview. But as time goes on, data must be refreshed. That brings me to our fifth and final secret to get your buyer to choose you, which is iterating and revising. We must constantly adapt change. We must constantly stay current. And in order to do so, I recommend that you keep a checklist for execution. Now, as the voice of the customer, as a product marketer, we have so much to do, and we are very overwhelmed with getting the job done at the end of the day. So I'm going to leave this checklist here. I'm not going to go through each and every portion. I'll let you dive through this in your own time. But I really recommend constantly updating all of these steps, constantly ensuring that you are current, that you're refreshing the data, that you're refreshing the statistics that you get from your competitive intelligence team. Truly do so in order to really stay current with your market and to be efficient with your product marketing team. After all, it's continuous improvement that is the pathway to success. When we're able to see this rotating circle of gathering the client or audience feedback and then acting on those results, we're able to truly keep going and keep iterating. Now, I gave you 5 secrets to get your buyers to choose you in this presentation. But if there's anything that I recommend, it is these 5 steps. If it doesn't work, change it. Always tailor the strategy to fit your buyer's needs. Be current, stay up to date, update data, and stay in contact. Think outside in by always looking at your buyer's interests and really getting outside of the bounds of your internal organization. Uncover direct client feedback to understand why your product wins or loses. And finally, develop actions to improve products and go-to-market strategies for the future. By leveraging these 5 secrets and also these 5 recommendations, we're able to have a robust strategy to understand our buyer in all ways, shapes, forms, and channels. At the end of the day, success through all these steps, all these avenues, all these secrets comes down to 3 main things. We must leverage product data. It must be refreshed. It must be used to solve problems. We must leverage analytics in order to bring us close to our buyer. But we always must leverage buyer data. We must execute interviews. We must ask the right question. We must segment correctly and ensure we're talking to the right person. But finally, we have to bring it all together. We have to use our data in order to use our buyers to truly understand what they care about so that we can market a solution that most effectively meets their needs and use messaging that will most resonate with their personalities and with their goals. After all, when you have an engaged audience, whether it's your B2B buyer or a wonderful group of coworkers, anything is possible. Thank you so much for attending my presentation. I really appreciate the time you took to listen to this content. I highly recommend going through the content in your own time, sharing it with your teams, and using it as a resource as you might either contact a buyer, execute an interview, and wonder what the right steps are to take. As well, I really recommend contacting me if you have any questions or comments about the presentation. I would love to connect on LinkedIn or via email. And good luck in all the work that you may do. So thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Welcome back to Product Marketing Off-Piste. We're sure you're enjoying the presentations from our guest speakers so far. We're enjoying playing host, and the good news is we've even more talks coming up. But before we throw even more grade A content your way, we want to take a moment to thank every person who's contributed to making Off-Piste a worthy addition to the product marketing calendar. Sponsors, partners, speakers, and of course every product marketer who is registered and tuned in. Enjoy the talk.
Every year, 60% of your team's time goes to doing things that aren't actually work. That's enough time to get from LA to New York. walking. With Asana, your team gets that time back. Asana makes it easier for teams to get work done, assign tasks, select due dates, and keep everyone on the same page. You can find the latest and greatest attached to each task. Discuss work details right where work happens. With Asana, your team can view any project in the way they find most useful. They can avoid getting overwhelmed by balancing their workload and removing bottlenecks. With Asana, you can see what everyone is doing and automate processes for the type of work you do most often. And it provides built-in feedback and approvals to keep things moving. Asana is built to scale across your entire company so anyone can see where things are at and how it all maps back to the company goals. So get that time back and get the team organized around the work that matters most. Try Asana today.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to my talk on customer segmentation in complex B2B markets. So I will be your host. My name is Laura Varela, and I'm coming to you from my home office in Chicago. I wish we could be meeting face-to-face. Hopefully this time next year, Product Marketing Alliance takes us somewhere sunny and we can all meet in person. But for now, here is another Zoom presentation. So a little bit about me and why I'm giving this talk today. I work at PayPal, and I'm currently leading the charge on developing our global marketing strategy for our enterprise solutions, along with my team. And a couple of years ago when I started at PayPal, the enterprise marketing team was sort of new. And so we started taking a look at all of our foundational materials and revamping them. And we realized that we had a really complex set of solutions and of customers, and that traditional segmentation really wasn't going to cut it. We weren't really targeting our messages enough for the right customers. So we decided to develop this dynamic customer lens framework that I'm going to introduce today. And I'm going to try to answer these 5 questions. So why do we use customer profiles? What is a complex B2B market? Why is segmentation more challenging in these complex markets? What is a dynamic customer lens framework? And how can I implement it so that it's actually used across the org? Because that's the trick with frameworks. You can build them, but they don't always get adopted. So why do we use customer profiles? So I'm sure I don't have to explain the value of customer segmentation to this group. As product marketers, it is our job to be the voice of the customer, and we've all used buyer profiles to some degree. But if we were in person, I'd ask to see a show of hands, and I'd ask all of you, how many of you actually use customer profiles consistently every day across all of your messaging? And I would bet that the numbers would be pretty low, just because I know how often we can build profiles and then forget about them because they're either too general or they're too complex, or maybe one team uses them, but everybody else in the org sort of does their own thing. And it's just not worth our time. And so I think that's unfortunate, right? I think there's huge utility to using profiles, and I think it's actually really necessary to good marketing. So if we take a look at this slide, this has been a really important concept for us to deliver on. We want to bridge the gap between what a customer needs and what actually motivates them to buy. And those can be two very, very different things. You can produce every product and feature and bell and whistle that a customer could ever ask for, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to buy from you. So for us, it's really important to both understand solution needs and, solve for what motivates them, their mindset to buy. And that's what makes really good marketing. Another great reason to use buyer profiles now more than ever is that 70% of the B2B buyer journey is complete before a buyer even reaches out to sales. 70%. So that means, they've completed their short lists of vendors, they've developed their own requirements that are very unique to their business. And B2B buyers are more sophisticated than ever, right? We have more millennials than ever who are decision makers now, with high expectations about how the buying process should be, the kinds of relevant content they should have access to, and they also expect a lot of relevancy and personalization to be built into their products. So, you have to be hyper relevant even before speaking with them or doing any discovery whatsoever. So it's not enough to have a great sales team and a lot of bespoke email messages. You really need to have strong marketing and information out there for them that is customized. So if you're not already doing serious work on your profiles and understanding your customers, I really hope you'll consider it. And hopefully the framework we show you today, or I show you today, is going to be helpful. So the other reason, that we use profiles is that there's benefits across the org. I think we really limit ourselves sometimes, or only marketing will use it, or sometimes just sales will develop their own profiles. But it's important to have everybody singing from the same songbook. So, not only does it make it more consistent, and do you have, a more unified message going out to market, but it's also really valuable just to gather all that information from so many different vantage points. So every single person from any of these departments that I have up here are going to have their own views about who our customers are, what their needs are, and they're going to have their own experiences and insights. When you develop these profiles, if you really find agreement and work together, you build institutional knowledge that is so valuable, and you really get information out of their heads and onto paper. And it's really, really valuable for the entire org just to see how everybody else is thinking. So so I'm a huge proponent. Okay. What is a complex B2B market? So to put it really simply, a complex B2B market has various buyer personas, various solutions, and various use cases to contend with. So I'll give you an example. I work on PayPal Enterprise Solutions. And so most of you probably think of PayPal as a digital wallet. Maybe Venmo, another one of our digital wallets. But we do so much more than the button, as we like to say. Enterprise Solutions basically is a SaaS set of solutions, a platform that provides everything a large enterprise could need to accept or make payments all around the world. That is a lot more complicated than it sounds. It's a highly complex technical sale, and there are a few different, reasons. So on the one hand, we have about, 15 plus buyers and influencers on decision committees. And they can be from all different functions. They can be from technology or marketing or finance. We even have a lot of payments consultants that are advising our customers. So we have to message them all, individually and differently. We have hundreds of point solutions, and those are applicable across different channels, geographies, industries, and objectives in different ways. So literally, our solutions could power endless commerce scenarios, whether you're buying and selling online or offline, or you have cross-border transactions, or you're charging for subscriptions, or you're paying out sellers on your marketplace, and the list goes on and on and on. And then to add another wrinkle, there are, an endless number of permutations of all of these different solutions and use cases. So why is segmentation challenging in these complex markets? Let's look at specific examples here. Okay, so typically B2B businesses like ours are going to use profiles either at the individual buyer persona level, or they're going to profile actual businesses. So starting with personas, it's probably the most common way to segment. Typically, you would pick a lens, a customer lens through which to look at your customer. And the most common among these is the role, right? So the role would be the customer lens, and then you would develop profiles according to each key role for your business. So that could be a CTO, a CFO, a CMO, etc. And so there are several different, groupings of this, right? You could look at the functional lenses. So like we said, role, there could be a difference between role and expertise. For example, a role could be a CEO, but if the CEO comes with a marketing background or comes with a tech background, they're going to need a different set of messaging and have different concerns. You could look at their demographics, their age, career level, location. You could look at behavioral attitudes about loyalty, about existing relationships and user habits. And psychographics, so their personal motivators, fears, and aspirations. And then you have your business profiles. And so they're very different in a lot of ways, but similar in others. So again, you can look at them by function, understand what their industry is, or their expertise or core competency. Look at their firmographics, right? What is their size? Why does that matter? Because a $4 billion company has really different needs than a $400 million company. Their business model, their performance matters, right? And performance can change drastically. So, with all of the, tough climate that we're in with COVID, we have industries and businesses that are doing extremely well. They're seeing meteoric growth because they're online retail, right? And then we have others that are really suffering, like travel. And so we have to have a very different set of messages for them, and they're going to be using our solutions in really different ways. In terms of geography, there's a whole host of considerations that come with this. So regulations will be different, consumer preferences, the locations and languages, cross-border considerations, and then you have the behavior of the organization. So, for example, at what level of tech adoption are they at, right? Are they early adopters or fast followers or laggards? What is their capacity for change? Do we need to support them in some extra way, or is it going to be a difficult sale because of their capacity for change? And then their usage habits. How are they interacting with your solutions or solutions like yours? And then there's the psychographic or cultural values of an organization. So their motivators, values, and aspirations as a firm. So our product marketing team would make the argument that you need to layer both personas and business profiles to get a complete picture. And that's because when we build products, we build them for people, not companies. And when we sell products, we definitely want to approach people and not companies. At the same time, those people are, inextricably part of a business, and they're incentivized to make decisions on behalf of the business. So it's really important to layer both their personal motivations and the company's motivations. And then look at those things from several different perspectives, because we know that there's lots of players and considerations that are going to impact a sale. And so right now you may be looking at this and saying, I thought this framework was supposed to reduce complexity, not create this complicated web. But to clarify, I'm not proposing that we micro-target individual buyers from all of these different angles. That would be crazy. That would be impossible. So now we're going to talk about how we can actually reduce complexity and create a manageable framework that works. So what is a dynamic customer lens framework? So the old way to develop profiles was to pick a customer classification or two, like a functional role, right? And then maybe, profile companies by their industry. And then you would look at all of your customers through those two lenses, right? Max. But knowing that now we're dealing with such a wide range of players and motivations, and that a lot of them are sophisticated enough to come up with their own unique requirements, we have to move to something more modular. And so that is where these dynamic layered lenses come in. So this approach allows us to do two things. One is identify the buyer mindset across several variables, and two, build specific messaging for each of those variables that can be selected at will. And so we call these variables customer lenses, and they can be applied or removed depending on who you're talking to or who you're building for. So here are some examples of how we did it. It's really not rocket science. It takes a little bit of discipline and organization, but it's pretty simple. So we thought about the term lens in the most literal sense. It's like going to the optometrist and getting fitted for a new prescription. When you go, you sit down, the doctor puts some lenses in front of you and switches back and forth between the lenses. Sometimes they layer them for astigmatism. And then the doctor keeps switching back and forth and iterating until she finds the right fit. And here are our little cool customer lenses. And so this is the approach we wanted to take when talking to our customers. And so here are just a few examples of lenses that could apply to almost any business. But you should tailor them for your business. It'll depend on your products, your targets, your strategies, etc. So our framework is a little bit different than this. We had 7 different lenses that are relevant for our business, but that's what our team uses now to craft targeted messaging. So then for each of the customer lenses, we developed profiles. So here we have the tech adoption lens, for example. And then within that, we have 3 buyer profiles: early adopter, follower, and laggard. And then we can always, when we figure out what we're trying to accomplish and with whom, we light up the relevant lenses and then apply them all together and see what that means. So here's an example of what a profile looks like in action. So we have a 3-slide profile template here. Our true one is a little bit different, and I have scrubbed this for proprietary information, disclaimer. But basically it should, be comprised of a few key elements. So we have our mission that we want to lead with. So for a early tech adopter, our mission is to inspire with exclusive innovation. Then we give a little bit of background on who they are and define them. Then we give a small bit of background on how decisions are made. So for example, with an early adopter, developers have a lot more say in a decision than in some other cases. Then we speak to their mindset, their growth mindset, what motivates them, their pain points and challenges, how we win with them, what messages will win and what will lose, and what we should definitely avoid with them. Another, slide or piece of information that you should include is what are the solutions that are going to be most important to them, or the business needs, right? So you could do, we like this framework: universal needs, their need to haves, their differentiators, want to haves, and the delighters, what they love to see and that we should lead with. And then you could do, any variety of verbatims. We find them really helpful just to provide some takeaways, some quotes. Sometimes we do word clouds. And I think it's really valuable for all the different stakeholders in different functions to see it in the customer's own words. So that would be the result of our customer lenses. Pretty simple. Let's see it in action. I have 2 scenarios. This first one is called Sales Takes Messaging into Their Own Hands. And I think all of us as marketers know this story already. So a salesperson, Alex, is working with the number 3 apparel company in Europe and is being introduced to a decision team that includes the CFO, CTO, and 2 project managers from different geographic regions. The salesperson also knows that their tech stack is very old and difficult to change. How does he prepare for this meeting? So let's take a step back and think about what sales needs to do, what their function is, right? So they need to prepare for the meeting. They've got to be ready to ask the right questions, and they're going to need to customize messaging and marketing materials. So it's their job to customize their pitches. We understand that. And, as we said before, B2B buyers have already done a ton of research. And by the time they get to this meeting, they don't want to see your generic stuff. They don't want to see your white papers. They want to know, how does this matter to me right now? Not just to my business and to my customers and all of that nuance, but also to me personally. And so therefore, it's understandable that sales will take a pitch deck that's, incredibly thoughtful and has been, really well prepared by marketing, and they will change it. And they'll change the slides, add slides, take out slides, and change messaging altogether. So, it's a nightmare. But you don't always have to lose control of the message and positioning. You always will to some degree. But if you have a dynamic framework and a set of materials for sales, it not only makes their lives easier, but it improves the quality and the consistency of the message. So they can still choose from a set of messages and slot them in as necessary. And you can sound like one company, so that your messaging is the same, on your website and in customer service and sales pitches. But at the same time, making sure that the individual customer still feels heard and receives somewhat personalized messaging. So let's see how Alex used the framework to prepare for the meeting. So we know that the company is a mega enterprise, and we'll define that as, a company that has over $10 billion in revenue annually. We know that from our customer profile about mega enterprises that they expect a really high level of servicing and support, and they need evidence of that support early on. So Alex should really bring several staff from PayPal to show our commitment. And so who does he bring? So if we look at our buyer function, we know there's going to be a CFO, a CTO, and some project managers. This means that this meeting is going to be about getting down to brass tacks. This is not going to be a high level like CEO meeting that's 15 minutes. This is probably going to be a deeper meeting with a lot of technical questions. Alex in this case should bring solutions engineers and relationship managers from each of the markets that'll be in charge of the account once the sale goes through. And the other thing Alex can do is figure out the materials to bring. So for these folks, maybe an ROI calculator and, proof points or thought leadership, nuggets from these regions, right, to show our expertise there. And then you have, another lens, which is really, really important, which is the tech adoption level. So, being a tech platform, and having so many solutions, there are many ways that you can approach this conversation. And with a laggard, you really don't want to come in with very scary, future forward, complicated technology that's not going to fit within their tech stack. It's not that you shouldn't talk about these things, but you shouldn't lead with them. You got to talk about what they care about first. And so that is why you would never want to leave out this lens. So him having this profile will then help him, enter with the right message. Scenario 2, product marketing builds a business case. So in this scenario, the sales organization is asking for a brand new tool related to fraud prevention based on the feedback from a few sales reps. They assume this premium cutting edge fraud product will be adopted en masse due to the ubiquity of fraud issues and concerns voiced by their customers. So how should the PMM, Anna, decide whether and how to build this business case, the business case for this tool? So Anna, her job is to size the addressable market, identify the right customer types to research, and then perform the analysis. In her case, we don't need to use every single lens, right? I mean, this is about being flexible and about simplifying as much as possible. So we know that the technology will make, the assumption in this case, that technology is industry agnostic of geography. We don't need to get into buyer functions at this point. What we really need to understand is where the biggest needs are for this product. So instead, we'll use just these 3 lenses, which are customer size, business need, and tech adoption level. And so, if Anna hadn't had this framework, she might have made her own assumptions, right? She could have under or overestimated the opportunity. And even when she went out to do research, she might have contacted the wrong customers because she didn't really have a sense for who this could be relevant for. Luckily, in this case, in this scenario, she does have a customer lens framework. And so she reads through it and she realizes that this business need is really not top of mind for all of our customers. It's only relevant for very, very large businesses, for those that encounter a high amount of fraud, and it's really only for early adopters because it's way too advanced for the rest of our customers. So now she can build a business case for this niche and evaluate the viability. So now you know how it can work, but how can you apply it to your business and actually get it to be adopted? This is the trick, in my opinion. There's 4 steps that I laid out. They're deceptively simple. They're actually pretty challenging, but so worth it. So first thing is bring in stakeholders for sprints. Sprints are always great. Creating documents on your own is never worthwhile, in my opinion. You need buy-in and you need insight. So I like to invite product sales, sales enablement, and marketing. Really anyone who's building for or speaking to your customers should be present. Like a select group of representatives. And then you have some thought starters, right? How do you identify these key lenses for your business? So you can ask questions like, who's your target customer? Do you need company profiles or individual buyer profiles, or both, or what kind? What or whom does a sale depend upon? And where can you find customer patterns? The second thing you can do is build a minimum viable profile template. So keep it really, really simple if you want it to get used. So what I mean by minimum viable profile template is the minimum amount of components that you can include in a profile to make it compelling and actionable. So think about, at the highest level, what product marketing needs to understand, what sales needs to understand, and leave it at that. And then the other thing to consider is, what information do you need to fill in these profiles, and how will you get it? If they're really challenging, it's challenging information to get or difficult to validate, then it's better to just leave it off, because you don't want to overcomplicate your life or anybody else's, or it won't get adopted. So then make the case for adoption. So back it up with research, right? Anytime you can show other, third parties validating it, or you have customer studies, or you can show the real pitfalls of failing to adopt a messaging framework that everybody uses. If you can show why the potential, ramifications of everybody spinning off with their own messaging, then it really brings it to life, and you'll get buy-in from leadership. And then finally, make it easy to adopt and follow through. So make it actionable, create snackable materials and training. So create just enough, but not too many materials, or they will get lost. So define the key lenses and the dynamic profiles. Have a how-to guide, probably attached to the same document. Do some practice sessions with your stakeholders, and then do periodic reviews and iterate, because these things can go stale and then not be useful. So those are the tips. And that brings me to the end of the presentation. I hope that it wasn't too dry, and that you really do use this. It can be really fun to get together with your teams and pull all this together. So leverage it across the org, across all of these different stakeholders, and feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions. All right, thanks everyone.
Welcome to Product Marketing Off-Piste. We've yet another exciting presentation coming up, but before we get started, we'd like to take a moment to thank every one of our sponsors and partners, because without them, we wouldn't be able to bring this event to you. Don't forget, each speaker is going to be answering your questions, offering tailored support after their presentation. So stick around, leave your question, and get advice from a true expert in the field, tailored to you. It's that simple. Enjoy the presentation.
Every year, 60% of your team's time goes to doing things that aren't actually work. That's enough time to get from LA to New York. Walking. With Asana, your team gets that time back. Asana makes it easier for teams to get work done, assign tasks, select due dates, and keep everyone on the same page. You can find the latest and greatest attached to each task. Discuss work details right where work happens. With Asana, your team can view any project in the way they find most useful. They can avoid getting overwhelmed by balancing their workload and removing bottlenecks. With Asana, you can see what everyone is doing and automate processes for the type of work you do most often. And it provides built-in feedback and approvals to keep things moving. Asana is built to scale across your entire company so anyone can see where things are at and how it all maps back to the company goals. So get that time back and get the team organized around the work that matters most. Try Asana today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this fireside chat. We're going to be talking about product marketing's influence on the product roadmap. I'll be your host, JD Prater. I am the product marketing lead head of over at AWS Activate. And today we have a very special guest, Josh Laurie. Josh, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks so much, JD. It's an honor to be on. Welcome to the audience. My name is Josh Laurie. I work for VMware. I lead product marketing and technical marketing for one of our fastest growing cloud services called Skyline. Before VMware, and I've been at VMware for 9+ years. It's amazing how time flies when you're having fun. But 9+ years at this company. I was at Accenture before that, delivering on next-gen data center. So actually in the data center, some interesting stories there. And then before that, I was in the United States Air Force for 4 years, working with our nuclear ICBM systems, which was a great experience.
Wow.
Yeah. And I grew up in New York, miss New York a lot. I live in San Jose now with my wife and twin boys.
Wow. Wow. Well, hey, thank you for your service. Getting right off the bat there. I really appreciate that. But
it's an honor.
Let's jump into it. So 9 years at VMware, you've seen a lot of change. You've led some teams. You've seen some products. We're going to be talking about the roadmap. And I know there's a lot of PMMs that are listening, and this can be kind of a sticky point. So we're going to get tactical within this fireside chat, but let's just jump right into with what are some of the benefits of getting product marketers involved in the actual roadmap conversations from the very beginning?
Yeah, it's a great question. And my evolution in my career is I started as an SE at VMware. So in the Northeast, actually working on technical solutions with customers and partners. I went into engineering, and I was actually driving the roadmap of one of our biggest platforms called the Cloud Foundation. And now I'm working on Skyline, which is its own product, line. And the roadmap is an important part of the kind of ecosystem of a product or the life cycle of a product. I really believe product marketers and product marketing, we're the window to the customer. We've walked the mile in the customer's shoes. We all have, pretty vast backgrounds of experience. And I think, being empathetic to the customer's needs, kind of having our fingers on the pulse of their problems and their feedback, that's really key. And I always tell my team that, customer feedback, listening customer problems, that's our guiding light. That's our compass for value. When you're lost, and a lot of times we are lost in our careers and in our jobs, that's okay, but always go back to that truth. What is the true north? And that's customer feedback, hearing it from the customer's mouth. And so, usually product marketers are in the meetings with customers, sales, partners regularly to understand those market forces at play. My team, I believe, meets with customers the most out of any other function besides sales, right? Sales is meeting with customers every single day. But we meet with them regularly, and we got to take advantage of that. And we're in the best position as product marketers to synthesize this vast amount of input, right, and customer feedback and their problems, and kind of dream up the new solutions to address those problems, and then serve that up on a silver platter to product leadership, product management, our ecosystem partners, engineering, and really influence that product direction, which relates into a much better narrative and future roadmap for the product, right? And we're going to get into a little bit more of that, but that's why I really feel like, you know, it's not just in the beginning of the process, it's in every part of that life cycle, from, you know, putting together the roadmap to actually delivering the product or service, to getting more customers to use the service, you know, and renewing the service, or whatever you're going, you know, whether you're talking about a SaaS service or a physical product, right? It's all about customer adoption and getting more usage out of that product so you can repeat that business over again, right? So it happens at all points within the process.
Yeah, so kind of like replay it. So like really meeting with the customer, that's a really important, because that's where you're going to hear a lot of this information, and you're going to gain a lot of these like unique insights. So you've got this bag, you've got this list of some really great, unique, valuable insights. Now, how do you bring those to the table whenever it's time for the roadmap? You know, you can talk specifically around like VMware. Is it like a once a quarter meeting when you guys are talking about roadmap? Is it once a year? And, you know, how often are you bringing these to the table?
Yeah, I mean, we'd like to see it more often, but we usually do it once a quarter, you know, as part of our, what we call PI planning. What we really like to do, you know, just from the onset, right? When we built our team, right? Skyline's a newer product. It's about 3 years old within VMware. And when we built our team, we really set out to create a very strong partnership between the product leadership team, right? Product management, engineering leadership, product marketing, right? That's a trifecta. And establish this 360-degree feedback loop, because you have so many different channels of inputs and feedback, and especially with the SaaS service, right? That we're talking about here, this example. I mean, you have in-product surveys, right, that are coming in every single day. You have real-time, you know, user data coming in every second of every day, right? And so the key is to establish that 360-degree feedback loop that terminates into one place, right? Because yes, having a lot of channels is part of the thing, right? I mean, you have to have that to get that rich fidelity, but then you can't go into a black hole. It has to terminate into one place. So what we use is actually a tool called AHA. We were using Jira before, but we put everything into AHA, right? And we try to automate as much as possible into AHA. And that way we have one place to kind of showcase what needs to happen with the product, right? And what customers are saying, what the field is saying, what our partners are saying. And once you have all the feedback in one place, then you need to develop a process to prioritize, or a criteria to prioritize that list, right? Yeah. And that's where it gets, you know, if you can agree and always revisit this criteria every time you have a question or friction, this is the best thing, right? So for example, on my team, it's, you know, how many customers will this feature impact? How much perceived value? What is the problem we're going to solve? You know, what are they going to gain from doing this feature? How much energy and cost, you know, is it going to take to build? Because we don't have unlimited resources, right? So we need to work within our control vectors. That way you can really serve, like, product management jobs gets a lot easier at that point, right? If you can serve up, kind of do a little bit of that pre-work, do a little bit of that homework on that unified list that I was talking about from all those different channels of feedback. That's where I really think things get lost in the sauce. Is you have all these different channels. It's really hard to collate all that information and then prioritize that with your product leadership team. And if you can have a simplified process to always go back to, and the criteria, it just makes everything else beyond that point much easier. So that's really how we make that more transparent, right? Because that AHA portal is open to the entire field. It's open to our entire team. It's open to our entire BU that builds a lot of products for VMware. And you know, it's very easy to understand, what are we committed to, why are we committed to those things, and what are we going to actually deliver, right? And then everything else that's going to fall below the line.
Yeah, 100%. I've used AHA in a previous org, and man, I it's a great tool for those out there listening. Jira. I've even been as scrappy as like Google Sheets. I think there just needs to be a repository, a place that you can keep all of this, because you talked about transparency, and I want to kind of dive into that a little bit with whenever you're thinking about building trust, you're gaining trust, you're trying to provide as much transparency and alignment between all of these different teams. I see that, bringing this unique insight, having this repository. Let's talk about some of those, like, how do you start to influencing with other teams now and across different functions when it comes to the roadmap?
Yeah, I mean, building transparency is really key, and because that actually builds on trust, right? And there is a theme in the industry that's growing to kind of share kind of those high level roadmaps with everybody. And I believe that more transparency, the better, right? Sharing those high level roadmaps, it's going to build the trust with your customer base, your sales teams, your partners. The late Tony Hsieh from Zappos, right? He just passed last week. The influence that he had on the industry, business, just employees, is that, share as much as possible. I mean, his whole recipe for success he shared, right, in delivering happiness. And actually, there's an example in that book where he builds what's called, I believe it's the extranet for Zappos, where all of the vendors, all the partners can go in and see Zappos profitability. They can see what they bought those shoes for, what the price was. You can see what the trends are. And he got a lot of flack for that, saying, well, isn't your competition going to find out about this? And his thing was like, maybe it will get into the competition's hands, but like, I'd rather have my partners, have transparency into what we're doing, catch mistakes, be in the business with us versus not. And, if it were me, right, running the business, I'd probably share the entire roadmap at a high level, share the incremental features and improvements that are, already public knowledge, right? You already delivered a feature. How are you going to improve that based on the customer feedback? Yeah, share that with everybody. But, maybe the net new blockbuster features for internal use only, we'll put that for internal use only, right? Share it within the team. And then deliver that net new capability and then build on that, right? Add it to the public roadmap. And then there's certain industries where, certain industries, certain markets where sharing these roadmaps may not be suitable, like, chip manufacturing, Intel versus AMD, Samsung versus Apple phones, Xbox versus PlayStation. But for most businesses that, we're involved with, I think more transparency, the better. It's really how you do it. And also just know when you're sharing more, you're in the court of public opinion, right? So if you put something on there that you're going to deliver and you're committed to it, you better deliver it, right? So you actually have more pressure, which actually creates a better, it's a fulcrum for actually action, right? within the organization. So that's how I think about the transparency part of it.
I want to ask you a question too, as a lot of us are we are gearing up for 2021, right? It is December. We're here, obviously trying to learn, get ready. And a lot of our roadmaps are probably getting shaped, getting formed, or maybe even, getting finalized in the next couple of weeks, right?
Yeah.
How has part of that roadmap is stakeholder management, right? And having that influence. Has that gotten harder for you within COVID? So I know a lot of us are remote. Do you have any tips around being visible, influencing the roadmap when a lot of us are still working remote from our own homes?
Yeah, it's a really great question. Even within this time, right? It's a very fluid time. A lot of things are changing, right? Our perceptions, our conventions of what normal is changing. But I still believe that everything that product marketing does in the product lifecycle should end up in the actual product at some point. And that's how we keep our relevancy in the company, in the organization, in business. And so I really try to think outside of the box with the team to say, like, marketing doesn't have to be just external and disconnected from the product. If you have that in mind, if you start from there, you can take this vast amount of knowledge that we talked about in the beginning, your first question, all the customer feedback and insights, and turn that into your company's .next. It doesn't have to be just your product, right? I mean, VMware has hundreds of products. I work on one product line within, right? And within that product line, it's kind of like many products. But you could really turn that into your company's .next, because every company is looking to transform radically right now, to your point about the pandemic, right? And so how PMMs do that, I mean, I can offer a few different examples of how everything you do can end up in the product, whether it's a physical product or a software product. That's how you maintain your relevancy with these stakeholders, right? Is putting your thumbprint on the scale to improve the customer experience, to improve the product experience, and ultimately grow your organization, right? So I'll just go through a list of those things, and we'll go from there. So number one, we talked about 360-degree feedback, right? It's super important to have that feedback loop visible, understood by the organization, and kind of how that machine works, right? So that's made up of many different components. You got customer adoption and usage, you got your customer feedback surveys, you got all of your one-on-one kind of intimate meetings with customers, which are great. I think a huge stakeholder that we kind of overlook in companies is customer support, right? We mentioned knowing the customer problems. Well, that's the best organization that knows, talks to customers every single day about their customer problems, right? So why don't we leverage that more? They have all this information about bugs that need to be fixed and enhancements, and they talk to they have their undivided attention, these customers, for many times hours at a time, right? So go meet with your customer support team. That's like a huge gold mine. And actually Skyline as a product, the one that my team owns, it's all about taking those customer support insights, turning them into code, and helping customers be proactive instead of reactive, right? If we can help avoid issues, the better experience they have with their investment in VMware. And so that's our unique differentiator as a company in the cloud space. So customer support. We also do a lot of these beta design studio sessions, right, with engineering, with product management, with our UX team, where we invite our best customers, the guys and gals that are most passionate about our products, to help steer the ship with us, right? Because if they feel involved, like it's more their product than our product, then the flywheel happens. It's customers telling customers, hey, come join this design studio session. Skyline, we're going to see their whole roadmap for the next 6 to 9 months. We're going to get to shape that, right? And we get some amazing ideas out of those, and we do that pretty regularly. I would say we do those once a quarter. We also have a Slack channel set up with our top customers, and it's open, where we can just go throw different mocks at them, for example, and they can go crazy and give us feedback. We have our events, right, where we meet with a bunch of customers, partners, analysts, PR organizations, things like that, where we get feedback. And then we have, market research and competitive analysis. So that's one big thing, right? Then on top of that 360-degree feedback, loop, and all the data that we're gathering, you can create a pretty powerful BI, business intelligence, business operations reporting mechanism on top of that. And that's what we've done in our business, because, if you can see, how your customers are adopting the product, how much are they using it, where are they falling off, right? What's the recurrence of, them logging in, why do they log back in, all this stuff, and create, BI out of that and share that out with all of your different stakeholders, then you become a powerful entity within the organization. And that BI actually a lot of times is with SaaS products, it may be internal facing first, but then you actually come up with, hey, why wouldn't we just put this in the product? Why wouldn't, for us, we have a couple different features that became part of the product because we started them as a BI project, right? And I'll give you just a couple examples of that. In Skyline, we show a lot of different proactive insights, recommendations on issues that the customers need to fix across their cloud platforms. And we wanted to show kind of historical analysis and health ratings, right? So we started that as an internal BI project on how would we show that internally first to our sales teams, to our TAMs, technical account managers, things like that. And then we were like, we should just put this into the product, right? So now we're starting to work with product management and engineering on how do we shape that. And then you have your day 0, day 1, day 2, marketing, kind of core marketing. And what I mean by day 0 is you're trying to get net new customers to use your product. Day 1 is they start using the product. What do they do next? And then day 2 is how do I get the most out of the product? How do I wring the most value, in our case, out of the software that they're using? And so all of that, most of that can also be put right within the product too, right? To drive consumption and engagement, all different capabilities, because a lot of these products are pretty complex. So we use tools like, Pendo, right? Where we can go in there as a product marketing manager or product manager on that side, and we can create a sticky experience based off of the usage data, right? So all of these different things where you start to grow your influence with all these different stakeholders that we talked about, but eventually it's all about taking those insights and making a better product out of them, right? How do you go from that, which is the kind of the input, to an output as fast as possible with the highest quality and the best customer experience? That's what we're always thinking about, and that just translates, into value, right, for the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying too is like we're all on the same team here. We all want to have a better product. We all want to enable our customers to do and be better, than where they were before us, right? So I know we have a lot of listeners on here that maybe like they are the first PMM. Maybe they're at an earlier stage company, maybe not have quite as many resources to aggregate all this information. But like one thing in particular that I think we can at least take away is bringing that voice of the customer to these meetings. What advice would you give if that's not currently in place? So if the voice of the customer is not being heard in these early roadmap meetings, what advice would you give in order to enable that?
Yeah. Well, it's unfortunate if the voice of the customer is not being heard in these meetings in your company. Maybe you're working at the wrong place. I don't know, but in our place of work, VMware, we run in a day 1 mentality, right? I know Amazon as well. It's day 1 mentality, right? Keep that energy like you just started yesterday. Your day 1 mentality is really important. You should feel empowered as a product marketing resource to share the customer voice, the feedback, because you own, right, the ultimate target, the goal for customer adoption, for consumption, and your product managers and your engineering should share in that goal, right? So I think sharing that responsibility across is key. We do that in our organization, and you don't have a product without the adoption. You really don't, right? So I think everything we discussed, with the 360-degree feedback loop, with creating one termination point so that you can, throw a criteria across that, or rubrics, to prioritize that should be a natural conversation. And that should happen at multiple points, not just in the beginning of a company, not just in the beginning of a roadmap. It should happen all the time. We're doing it on a quarterly basis. I believe it should be even more frequent, but that's what we have right now. And like I said before, if you're not having these conversations or your company doesn't value that, I think you're probably working at the wrong place.
Yeah, that's a tough one, man. That's a tough one. Whenever you're thinking through, maybe again, I'm a new PMM, I'm just getting started. Yeah. And you're thinking about customer insights, you're trying to gather that customer voice. I've been told that you love customer journey mapping. Can you walk me through some of your process and what you tried to accomplish?
Yeah, this is the part of, the first question where I said, you got to walk a mile in your customer's shoes, right? So I'll tell you what happened when we first started Skyline 3 years ago. And this is something that we carry forward now is we went to the customer support organization and we said, we want to listen in on your phone calls. So we want to help you actually with your customer support calls. And we interviewed a slew of customers and technical support engineers. These are the support, representatives of the company, from a customer experience and an employee experience. And we just said, how does this flow shake out, right? The customer support experience flow for both the customer and the employee. Where are the pitfalls? Where are those emotional kind of sticky friction problem points? Where do those come up? And what are the biggest pain points? And so we just laid that out on a map from start to finish, which was, customer has a problem. They can't figure it out themselves. They try to search for all this knowledge, right, that's out there, KB articles, blogs. They can't figure it out because there's millions of them and they, have a very complex environment. So it's impossible for a human to do that with all their other tasks on hand. Then they're like, all right, well, we own an insurance policy with VMware. It's called a support contract. Let's call VMware up. And things start to dissipate after that. We've all been on the phone, customer support. They don't know anything about you. You got to explain to them what you're even seeing. It's like a black box to them, right? So there's no visibility. And then it's like, all right, it's just you're waiting for, logs to be sent up. You're waiting for them to do root cause analysis. So we went through every step, every painstaking step of that process. And we looked at that very closely. And so we were able to take bite-sized chunks from all these different anecdotes and put together our roadmap on how we're going to address the most painful points, what we call moments that matter in this customer journey. And so with that, we had a really nice narrative that we can share, right? Because we had all the problem statements. We had, our potential solutions to solve those. And then it was in a really nice order of how the customer actually interacts with VMware, the face of VMware. And so we always go back to that. I'm like, hey, are we improving this customer experience? Are we solving those customer problems that we first set out? And we always resolve that. We always kind of remediate on a regular basis on, okay, well, have we moved the needle here? Or are we just kind of status quo, right? So that's really important. There's a whole bunch of companies out there that can help you put together a customer journey if you don't know how to do it. But it is a pretty easy process. You have to walk in your customer's shoes, see what they're dealing with from end to end, right? Because there's a lot more than just your product in the company. You have a lot of other experiences in the way. And the other factor when it comes to customer journeys is, are you lowering the effort that the customer takes to get through that journey? That's what actually creates loyalty. That's what actually brings them back for more. And actually, I have to hand it to Amazon. You guys have made this, you guys have basically coined that, right? Lowering customer effort. That is the frictionless experience that we all want, but it really is true. If you can lower the customer barrier to adoption, they will use your product for sure. And that's why millions of us have Amazon packages showing up every day on our doorsteps. Yeah. And why, Amazon AWS is just adopted by every new company out there because it's just so easy. It doesn't have to be beautiful, but it has to be low effort. And so that's how we kind of grade, are we moving the needle in this customer journey? If that makes sense.
Oh, I like that. No, I think that was like spot on. I mean, just something I hope all of you guys listening took that and are going to be internalizing that, because that's some really good nuggets. And some things I want to kind of pick out from there was this idea of like customer adoption, customer retention, then even like customer loyalty, which kind of leads me to I want to back up. I want to insert in the middle here, sales, right? So there's always this kind of healthy tension. I'm gonna call it healthy tension between marketing and sales. But in regards to the roadmap, whenever a change happens, so we're talking, it's going to increase loyalty, it may increase retention, but may not necessarily like increase net new sales happening in Q1, right? How do you play with that tension? How do you deliver that feedback?
Yeah, it's a healthy tension. It should be happening. Sales should be pushing you for more. That is good. If they're not, there's something wrong with your sales organization. But it's a great point. And so it goes back to that criteria that I mentioned. If you have a set criteria, an accepted criteria that everybody agrees on, sales included, that says every new feature request, right, is going to go through the same process to be prioritized, then we all have that starting ground. We all have that kind of common rules of the road. And so for us, we always go back to that, right? We just had a bunch of sales folks today say, hey, we need all these new features for Skyline today. And we're going to go through those one by one and go through that criteria, right? How many customers on the platform? We have 10,000 customers today using Skyline. How many, is it only going to impact one big customer? Is it worth it for that one big customer? Maybe it is. I don't know, but you have to make that determination with product management and engineering. How much cost is it going to take to build this feature, right, for these customers? How much perceived value are they going to get out of it? Is it going to move the needle? Is it going to reduce customer effort? And the loyalty piece is more than just your product, right? That's your entire brand. That's the company's experience, how customers perceive your company. And again, going back to Tony Hsieh, I think he did an amazing job, right? When people think about Zappos, they're like, hey, I wish Zappos was an airline. I wish Zappos like could run the IRS because they have such an amazing experience, right? That's what we need to strive for, I think, right? So that's like the ultimate, that's the ultimate level that we need to achieve. But with sales, I think it goes back to that prioritization criteria that you establish way in the beginning where everybody agrees. You always come back to that. That way, when friction comes up, you can say, hey, we're not going to deliver that for that one customer, but we are going to do, these 5 things that are going to impact a bunch of customers and going to make your customer very happy, right? And so there's a little bit of a trade-off there. Ultimately, you are empowered to make that decision with your product leadership team on what's going to be, and there's going to be exceptions, but you shouldn't have too many exceptions, right? Then you start going down a slippery slope, and your criteria doesn't mean anything anymore. Yeah, so I think that's where I always go back to when I'm explaining this to sales. I used to be in sales shoes, so I understand their plight in the field. It's an amazing role. Sometimes I really miss it being in the field. But I also know that when you go back to, so the field in my mind is like, the customer representative in the store, in the brick and mortar shop, right? Talking to the customers every single day, trying to figure out and solve their problems. They want to be the heroes. Then they have to go back and say, well, this product really doesn't meet my customers' needs. They go back to the factory, and the factory is like, I get 1,000 of these requests. I'm not going to really do your one thing, right? Right. So the more that sales can come back and say, hey, I know that criteria that the factory uses. I'm going to try to package up all my feedback across multiple customers and say, what's the biggest bang for the buck, right? Not just these one-off. That's the best, right? Because then both sides are maintaining the rules of the road, and it's not like you always have to go back and explain it and be the office of no, right? Which sometimes we feel like we are, right, in the factory.
Yeah.
It's the land of no over here, and they just get frustrated. So I think both parties have to maintain those rules of the road and do their best to maintain that healthy tension, right? So to your point.
I want to wrap up this conversation, and it's been eye-opening. Thank you so much for sharing so far. I want to ask a slightly different question, and it's how much influence should a marketing strategy have on the overall vision of a roadmap?
Yeah, I mean, again, I have my beliefs, but in my opinion, marketing is the leadership. Right? We are the tip of the spear and kind of everything else follows. And some marketing organizations are very far over their skis. Some marketing organizations are very conservative. I like to be somewhere in the middle, right? But I believe that, the product roadmap is just one piece of the puzzle, right? What supports that is those problem statements that we talked about. What are your customers' problems? How are you articulating the solutions very simply, right? That they actually remember and it sticks with them, like, oh yeah, this company does X or this product does X, Y, and Z, and it's not too complex. And there's a vision. What's next? What can I get excited about as a customer or a partner or a salesperson? That all comes from marketing. Every single one of those things come from marketing. Product managers, super important. We love product managers. We can't do our jobs without them, but they're really prioritizing, right? Looking at the business as a whole and making sure at the other end of engineering where the sausage is made that they actually get a quality product and it meets their specifications for those requirements, right? That's what their job is. But everything else before that, the vision, the problem statements, the market sizing, the story, the narrative that you shape, the brand perception, all of that comes from marketing. And so it just matters where you want to end up on that spectrum of, you want to be way over your skis and over promising, under delivering, or do you want to be super conservative and not being far, like kind of edgy in the market, or be right in the middle, kind of under promising, over delivering? That's where we always want to be, right? That's a cliche, but that's where you want to be. But I think the product roadmap is nothing without the other pieces supporting that foundation, which is, again, those problem statements. How are you solving those problems? The vision that you have for the future, and then the company culture kind of wraps all of that up in a bow. And that all comes from marketing, in my belief. A lot of that comes from marketing.
Well, I mean, what a fireside chat. I'm fired up. I mean, we're going into 2021. I think I'm ready now. I'm ready for some roadmap conversations. I'm ready to go. I'm feeling much better about marketing's place, my role. Josh, again, I mean, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, your tools, your tips, your analysis, your feedback, your opinions, your thoughts, everything into this fireside chat. I can't thank you enough. I mean, really good stuff here. I hope everyone listening is going to be taking away and marching into 2021 ready to go.
Well, I had a great host to guide me in this. So thank you, JD. And we're already hit that double black diamond. Stay safe out there, everybody. I know it's a hard time, but 2021, it's got to be better than 2020, right? so yeah,
fingers
crossed. Fingers and toes. You can't see my toes right now, but everything's crossed. JD, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.